Alrighty. Uh, Hello and welcome. As is an annual thing for me, I like to play through and talk about some of the games I worked on over the past 12 months. Um, this is going to be a little bit different from previous ones in that I have significantly fewer games. Last year was pretty busy and I didn't have an opportunity to participate in as many game jams and game adjacent type activities as I'd have liked. Um, which is disappointing, but it's also a positive thing, and helps me keep a roof over my head. The other thing that I don't normally do is I don't normally include contract work, mostly because when someone pays me to work on their game, I'm usually working on their game, not my game. Uh, in the case of the away team's Lost Exodus update, I had a degree of creative latitude that was on par with what I would have if I was collaborating with people on my own projects, so I decided to include it here. I also don't usually include mod work, but in this case, I think Ruben the Claw Troll is a kind of a standalone experience that is a little bit separate from the base Hand of Fate 2 experience, and it's also quite a personal work. So we'll be playing through and talking about that one as well. But first up, we're going to be doing the Away Team Lost Exodus, and I'm going to have the Away Team's lead developer join me, and we're both going to talk about what it was like to work on the game and what the game means to us. So, can you hear me, Michael? Maybe.
Yes, I can.
Hey, you're on stream. Welcome.
Hey,
So
how are you doing?
when I have my collaborators on, usually I invite them to describe the game in their own words. How would you sum up the away team in a couple of sentences?
Oh, that's always hard for me to do. I guess I would say that it's a roguelike text adventure, like choose your own adventure, with kind of like some 2D areas to kind of help move the game along in a more exciting pace.
And how long ago did work on the game start?
Oh man, I want to say about 2011.
Right. Um, Sorry, I'm actually trying to use you to fill time while I make OBS behave. Okay, there we go. Let's go turn it down a little so that it's not louder than you. Um, yeah, so 2011, and then it came out in 2015. Is that right?
I think it was 2016.
2016. Yeah. And then the Linux version came out a year after that, and that's about when I got involved. Um, which was like, what was your reaction at the time? Because that's sort of fairly unconventional way of jumping on board with a games development.
Yeah, it was interesting. To kind of like, I guess the real way we connected was Discord, having you kind of jump in there, and it was really interesting. It kind of rested on like your experience and everything of like coming up to me and knowing that you've done so much, in the past. I do get some people who like want to just like dive right in, and it like I totally encourage that, and I try my best to direct them in like the most successful way possible. um but not a lot of time do they have like the experience needed where you did, and it was actually, I was like blown away. I was like, wait, you want to work on this game, like this game that
I
I made.
I think as well, like if you've got a game with mod support, sometimes there's value in redirecting people towards just modding. But in this case, I'd offered to help out with a bunch of um, platform specific issues, and it got off the bat by sort of proving myself with addressing those. And we rolled out a couple of minor patches before I sat down and said, hey, I'd like to work on something bigger scale.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that bigger scale is like it always sounded really really awesome to me. And so that's also kind of what drew me in, is that like I was like, yeah, yeah, definitely. I like, and even some of your things were things that I had in the past like thought about, and then like determined either it was like too extensive of like work to hit the release date that I wanted to and
Right.
everything, or but a lot of times it was like a really unique outlook on things, and so I was really appreciative of that, of like being able to bring in, I guess like a set of eyes, really.
Yeah, yeah. So before we dive in and start playing the game, I I mentioned that we worked on some cross-platform, platform stuff. I ended up doing the Mac port as well, and then we worked on this big sort of expansion scale update. And my number one sort of guiding priority for that was to make sure that everything that was put in was about elevating the existing experience and enhancing what was there rather than turning it into something else. And I think when you're working on a game, like, you got to understand that dramatic changes to an existing game, like a released game, are super risky. If you've got an audience that appreciates the game for what it is, then potentially alienating them is not positive. So with that in mind, there aren't any new planets in this update. There aren't there are a couple new characters, but there aren't any sort of new base characters. We added some character customization stuff, which we probably won't use. We'll use the base characters because they're interesting, but there's a whole bunch of things you can do to make your own characters and make them interesting in ways that you like. But yeah, all the other things are about like supporting and elevating the gameplay, or expanding the mission content that was already there, or adding in little bits and pieces to ensure that the pacing is interesting, keeps things engaging all the way along. So I'm going to make a new game here, and as I said, I wanted to bring default characters. So I take my favorites. We're going to have Arik, Osmin, Aslan, Korra, Michael, and Fallon, I reckon. How does that sound?
I think that's great. Yeah,
It's
that's
a good
some
team.
of my favorites too.
So the writing was like one of the things that attracted me to this game the most. I think I played about 20 minutes before I went, this is something that I want to be involved with. This is something that I want to kind of... Well, not necessarily that I wanted to be involved with, something that I would enjoy being involved with and contributing to in some way. Now for this playthrough, the game is so text heavy that we're not going to have a chance to talk about working on it if I read it, so I'm going to skip through most stuff. If anybody wants to go slow and read it, we've got a demo available on itch and on Steam, so feel free to go and check that out. One of the first additions, or probably the addition that you'll see the most, is this sector report screen, which tells you how many planets are in the sector. I've got some cheats enabled. We'll turn that off. And gives you some like just flavor text, as well as hints on what your narrative goals are, and just things to remind you of what you're doing and why you're doing it. That was a big priority, because like when you jump into a new place, you're like, what am I doing here? What happened last time? If you've quit the game and you've come back to it, I don't think originally there was anything in the game that really invited you to think that or feel that way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I do think it extremely like did exactly what it set out to do in that aspect of like being able to jump right back in and even just get information like either after quitting and coming back, or even just you just went through a long mission that where you're reading all this text, you're way into the mission, and then all of a sudden you're back at the sector screen. So what were you doing? Was there another planet in this sector screen or anything like that? So I think it definitely brought a lot to it.
Yeah, I think that uncertainty of like, is there somewhere I can explore and go, was a big thing because we have people who had to explore every part of the map without, without having any, what am I saying? And without knowing whether or not there was going to be another thing. So everybody would explore everything regardless, and end up wasting a lot of fuel. And it meant that the amount of fuel that you would use within a given sector would be fairly consistent as well. So there's no interesting variation in that. This background piece was like the first piece of kind of original art I put in the game, I think. And that was another thing that I really wanted to do, was to make the ship feel a lot more present. And so putting this aft view blueprint style picture of the ship from a perspective that you'd never see in game, I think just kind of helps make it feel a bit more real, a bit more present.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So the other big thing that we did is that we changed the sector. Like, we changed the look and feel of the sectors a little bit, but we also changed them mechanically. There's rotation now when you turn. Instead of snapping to the direction you go, we've got these asteroid fields that slow you down and make exploring, they kind of get in the way of exploring and make that more of an interesting and technical experience. Whereas before, the location of the planets even was displayed by default, and you just went straight to your objectives.
Yeah.
This one's Jeddah 79. That's the Jade mission. Internally, we call it. All the mission names are based on like precious metals or gemstones and stuff, which I kind of dig. I added a new type of mission, which I'll talk about in a bit. But I think I'm going to take everyone except for Fallon on this mission, because she's xenophobic and we don't know what we're going to find down there. This is one of my favorite missions. This one in particular has some nice imagery to it, like particularly with like the creatures and the mural and the underground room that you find with the transmitter in it. I think it's pretty cool. Do you have a favorite mission in the game?
My favorite mission, it's I forget the exact name of it, but it's the spaceship one where you're going through and you have to go through all of the different like initials, and you just kind of scrounge your way through each quarter.
Yeah, that's titanium, I think.
Yes, I wanted to say it started with a T. Yeah, and I can actually tell you a little bit more about this mission.
Yeah.
Which started this was actually the first mission done by our first writer, Matt Fleming, who ended up not having enough time for the project, and so for better or worse, that mission in itself, like the base structure stayed there, but
Yeah, right.
Michael Fiegel came in and was able to basically kind of rewrite everything on that aspect, and so it kept kind of like the major steps of it, but it was also like you kind of like found the creatures a lot earlier, and like the dais was a little different, and
Yeah, right.
it,
That's cool. I really like Michael Fiegel's writing. I think he did most of the writing or almost all the writing in the game. And for me,
I think, yeah.
coming on board to to extend that and add to that, emulating his style was a big challenge for me. I'm not as well read as I would like to be, and that was like a constant source of some feelings of inadequacy. I didn't really feel like I was necessarily going to be capable of matching the quality of writing that he put in the game. And it's hard for me to assess whether or not I did. I feel proud of what I put in the game, but just what was already there was so interesting and so evocative that that it kind of invited me to raise my own bar, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And at least from like kind of an outside perspective, or at least reading two works here, um, I could definitely say it, like, at least to me, it definitely matches. It definitely brings in that same like cadence, that and style that Fiegel had, and he he was he was like a great asset on the team in that regard of like, not only did he do the writing, but he did the mission programming as well.
Right, he did the implementation of that writing, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Which is really hard to do if you've got a writer who's not used to writing non-linear narratives, is like squeezing that work into, or getting them to think in the right way or provide the right kind of content for implementing correctly. Like, having someone who's capable of doing that is a big asset, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he had a lot of experience beforehand in that, working at various different game studios and whatnot. And then he kind of afterwards kind of like went off and wrote a very linear story, which I guess you call a book.
That's Blackbird, is it? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Blackbird.
Go out and buy it. I haven't read it. It's probably good.
Yeah.
I won't check it out, but it's kind of haven't had time.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's about murders and whatnot, and I haven't gotten too much into it, but yeah, it definitely seems interesting.
So another thing that we added, something that early on I was really keen to do. So we mentioned that that first screen in the sector, a lot of its functionality was about reminding you of what you were doing and why you were doing it. There was also, I felt like there was a bit of a disconnect where you go through and you play these missions that give your characters a bit of flavor and feel like they're providing you with interesting experiences and stuff. But when you come out the other end, you end up in a situation where all of those decisions that you made, all of those interesting bits of narrative that you explored, get boiled down to two numbers: fuel and food, and then you've got no reason to ever remember anything that you did. So I added in this thing here. This was originally just a blank spot on the screen that didn't do anything, and for some reason I think the embossed logo reminded me of something. I don't remember exactly what, but and it's probably something I made up rather than anything tangible. But like I used to play a lot of X-Wing and TIE Fighter and stuff, and there was always something cool about going and looking at your little metal case and looking at all the things that you'd done, all the things that you'd been awarded, as reminders of the missions that you completed. And I was like, something like that. Not from a perspective of these are official awards you've received, but something that reminded you, gave you some reason to go, oh yeah, I remember doing that. That felt like it would be super worthwhile. And so I had this idea that maybe the crew could pick up little bits and pieces along the way. They're all crazy kleptomaniacs, some more so than others. But the idea that maybe they'd be drawing pictures or taking photos or picking up shells on the beach or something like that, felt like it was another way to add a bit more character depth to them as well. It's not, explicit character depth, but it gives you the opportunity to project something about that character. So in this case, on that mission, when we got a thing that upgraded our sensors, we found a piece of alien technology and we were able to integrate it with our systems. Arik here, do you say Arik or Arik?
Yeah.
Arik. I say Arik, but yeah. I don't know. Michael's probably the right one to. Michael Feigl was probably the best one to ask, but yeah. So it says that this is a side panel from this thing, and this character found it interesting, and so kept it. And then Cora over here took a photo of the tower that we went into, and also grabbed a sketch of the mural there that I mentioned. And I think the tower was like the very first one I painted as well. Definitely the first photo. I think the micrometeoroid might have been the first actual memento that I put together.
Yeah, and they definitely add a lot to the game, and especially as like you as an AI, I'd almost want to add like, yet another layer of like the AI questioning why everyone's picking up stuff and like
Yeah.
and it's like you're just adding to the weight of the ship and and all of that stuff.
I think it'd be
But
cool to like maybe. I try to think about like because at the moment all of our mission scripts are self-contained, and it would be nice to have um, the AI comment on it the first time they pick something up and kind of go, oh, like there is a problem with increasing the mass of the ship and the cargo that it's carrying, but at the same time the emotional, you know, sentimentality of the crew is something that you recognize and see as important. Um, I think that would be like a nice beat to have, but we'd want to only do it once, so it would be not something we could track as part of the normal mission scripting system. Or maybe we
yeah,
could have a
yeah.
thing where like a character wants to pick up something huge and bring it home, and you're like, no, put my foot down on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that I guess that's kind of also in the core of the game where you have this AI trying to boost morale and trying to understand like human emotions and things like that. Which is
Yeah.
always, like that balance of like can this AI, like the AI works off data, not necessarily emotion, so
Is
it
it
doesn't
capable of
necessarily
calculating this? Right.
right, exactly.
Something that always stood out
Can
to me is in the first story mission, I think it is. There's a bit where it says that it was made. The clues were made with the idea that the human crew would recognize it, and the AI would process all the data that the humans recognized, and that it wouldn't be possible to solve the puzzle unless it was your crew or a crew like it, or your ship or a ship like it. But it makes note to say that that might be true of past AIs, but you've got far more aptitude for understanding and calculating human emotions, which I always thought was like that's kind of cool. Um, in my mind, the AI and the crew when you first start the game haven't had much of an opportunity to interact as well. So there's like this. When I play, I like to imagine that the AI is learning about the crew as we go, and kind of we've got their psych profiles and we've got evaluations of them, but we get a more deeper and more nuanced understanding of them as we go.
Yeah, for sure, and it's definitely like I guess that really expanded off of like the conversations I had with Fiegel of like, but why are they doing this, and like why don't they just automate it all away and stuff like that, and and so it was, I don't know, it's kind of a struggle to make things believable without I guess what I really didn't want to do is like jump down that video game trope thing of just like, oh yeah, it's a video game though, so it makes sense, right?
I
Like you're
mean,
only
it's
doing
a
this
pretty easy
because
conceit to feel like you're justified in making, but I think the fact that that you guys sat down and thought about it makes everything stronger.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Um, this mission here is a new thing. This is stuff that happens between the planets. Trying to make that space between going, preparing to go down on planets, which is like it's dangerous, but the idea is that it's meant to be prepared, and it's something that you consciously engage in because it's part of your mission. Um, what you find on the planet is unexpected, but that you find a planet and that you visit it is not unexpected. And I felt like there was room to put in something, some little random events that are not expected, that happen between the planets. At this one, which we get um, you come across some interesting things that you could do some scientific study of. Was sort of, I guess, the backbone of that system. I would have liked to have put a lot more content in, and in fact, there is some work in progress stuff, partially finished mission that's similar to this one. This one recurs, and the idea is that you find random space stuff that's worth studying every now and again. Mechanically, it becomes a gamble of, do you spend some food or fuel in order to, do some research and potentially improve the ship, and sometimes that ends up. I like here. I managed to squeeze in a thing where it randomly picks whether or not your sensors saw it first, or whether a crew member saw it first. And if the crew member saw it first, they ask if they can name it. And then we never mention that again, unless it's a dud one. But then when you go back out on the map, there's a little marker and it's got their name on it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that little marker was definitely really definitely something I really love. It kind of it kind of reminds me of all the people naming stars now, and like going out and trying to buy a star to name and stuff like that, where I guess it matters, but not really. I mean, like, you'll never go there, you'll never like really like get affected by the star's name or anything, but sure, you have a planet or a star named after you.
It's a nice little touch, I think. So we found a neutron star here. Um, we can study it further, but it's going to take some time, so it's going to use some fuel. So we'll study it. Or observing its spin and pulses. I did a bunch of reading about different interesting stellar phenomena, like neutron stars and coronal mass ejections and black holes and stuff, and tried to make it so that so that I wasn't just talking out my backside too much. It's pretty light, it's pretty shallow discussion of these things. I don't really go into what your findings actually are. I just say that things are unusual or interesting and that you've learned something rather than what exactly you've learned. But trying to ground it. I don't know how successful I was, but trying to ground it in something that might make people feel like they know a little bit more about a thing, or that they might be inspired to go and look up what a neutron star is. I think that's ideally what will happen.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's always like a really strong suit of games, of like trying to pull in reality at least enough to get you interested in like loading up the Wikipedia page or something on that subject, and that's always it's always something I really like in games, and I really try to do with the away team, is like um, hopefully get people interested in just space and exploration and what
Yeah.
might happen in the future.
I really enjoy that it's a game that I think invites people to think. There are a lot of things that happen that don't have solid answers, but have hints at things that you can consider and weigh up, and I feel like the game doesn't really explicitly tell you a lot of things that maybe other games would. That's something I really dig.
Yeah, definitely. And part of that is always just like, you're not in life, you're not really going to have the answers all the time. Like,
Yeah.
there are scientific questions that we have that have not been fully answered, and like we don't fully understand some of like, the basic things that, in 1,000 years we will be like, you don't understand the workings of the brain? Come on.
I think
So
there'll
simple
always
now.
be some unknowns though. Like, I think that's a universal thing. And like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I think the game reflects that at a whole bunch of levels, where like, you just don't know if you put your hand in that hole, or if you let your crew put their hand in that hole, then maybe they'll get a bitten off, and maybe they'll find some food. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so just kind of like that mystery bag of life, of like, there, you could collect all the data that you want, but when push comes to shove, you have to like make an action, and that action is going to be influenced by your risk slash reward, in your brain, and trying to figure out, the like, do you really need the food? Is it worth the risk, or
Hmm.
could you, just maybe move on?
That's something that I really like, is that it's very much, you put yourself in a situation where you're like, I understand that there are risks, and I've already lost a couple crew members to it. Is the potential outcome worth what I'm going to be expending here if things go wrong. I really enjoy that it's always putting forward risk versus reward propositions.
It's really why I like the titanium a lot, is because like you'll get to a point where you'll probably lose a crew member on that mission if you take a little bit more risks, and you'll still have to go through all the rings, and so you'll still be searching through all the different corridors and whatnot. And so at a certain point you have to go, do I have enough food? Do I have enough, like this space station, probably doesn't have too much, fuel or food left. Do I really need it, or can I just do really quick searches and get out of here?
There's something as well that mission has, is that it really, I think, invites you to consider the mortality of yourself and your crew, because that space station is made up of one of your predecessor ships. They didn't get to where they were going, so they built, they tore down the ship and built it into. We're going to be spoiling stuff here, by the way. They stripped down the ship and turned it into whatever, into a place to live. And it didn't work out for them, because you see all these kind of dust-filled spacesuits floating around.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like the reality sinking in of like, maybe whatever mission you're on wasn't a great idea to begin with, but here you are now, already, across space on your way, and you kind of get this reminder of like, there's no turning back, and the only other option is to, I guess, kind of float in space and hope you could find food.
So we're doing the first story mission here, where the crew gets bored at your verbosity when you're explaining what's going on. I love that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think in the titanium mission as well, like one of my favorite mementos is, because not only are there like all these dead crew members floating around and stuff as well, but also you're reading their last words, which, as a sort of final thing, the crew decided that they could burn those messages into the screen and have them there for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years even, maybe. And you're kind of reading their last thoughts that they wrote down. And one memento that I put in was like this teddy bear, and I'd kind of, it's not a teddy bear, it's like a stuffed pig. I painted it on stream because I streamed myself doing some of that art, and I was just like, hey, I want to draw a pig because that's fun. And then I was like, this is a stuffed toy. That means that it's got to come from somewhere where there have been people, and it means that it's got to have like some kind of sentimental value to someone, right? And I found one of the messages from the crew there was talking about how nothing matters, and no matter how hard you try, you're going to get forgotten anyway. Why do you care?
Yeah.
And I have this idea of like to find some other artifact beyond just that message, and to have someone in your crew go, well, maybe you do deserve to be remembered. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of that outlook of like, if nothing matters, if in 100 years or so, or 100 million years or so, Andromeda Galaxy collides with the Milky Way galaxy, like
I think it's billions of years off, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I guess, yeah. Time scales, how do they work? But yeah, and so it's always that thing of like, you wanna try to be around forever, but
yeah, it's like, what does mortality mean? What does immortality mean? How do you persist? These are interesting questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, another thing. Oh, here we go. We got this new one that nobody's ever seen before. In fact, you've never seen before. I've not committed it
Oh,
to the repo. I like to commit working things. I always feel a bit uncomfortable when I push something up that's unfinished or doesn't work, because it means that if I get hit by a bus, then this, it's somebody, I'm leaving work for someone else to do. Um, but in this one, so we have the like the science one, and in my mind, that's the AI doing its thing, and the crew are just kind of hanging around, and maybe they look through a telescope or something, but you're doing all the real work, and they're just waiting for you to get it done. Um, and I also like as well that the research ones, like or researching the stellar phenomenon or studying the stellar phenomena, um, but that puts a nice kind of scientific spin on the mission, or on what you're doing. That isn't just, hey, we're barging down onto this alien planet to see if we can find some aliens to eat. Um, it's yeah, I like that it gives some kind of like scientific spin to things. I think that's interesting. But another thing I wanted to do was like have moments to see the crew during their downtime as well, and how you interact with them. And one of the ideas I had, which is like super not original, like everyone does this, right? Is to have the crews playing tabletop gaming, and you get to see them express their character in this kind of fictional setting. So in this, I kind of want to give you this sense of you as the player are the dungeon master. You're in charge of coming up with the story that the crew's going to play through. So you set a few variables and then more or less sit back and watch, and maybe tell them when they can't do something they want to do. And so at the beginning, you've got these three places. You choose one of the three where the story's going to take place. There we go. So we've picked Allura, which is the realm of these kind of amphibious lizard people. And then we can give them a MacGuffin, which is like an artifact, a person, or some wisdom, which I think, I don't know, let's do wisdom, because I like that one. And will require overcoming challenges of combat, riddles, or stealth. And like this is the bit I haven't quite added in. There's like a half-finished combat system in there. Stealth just kind of does stat checks against people's abilities, and riddles I need to write. I haven't written any riddles, so we'll actually maybe I wrote a couple. We'll use riddles and we'll see what happens. So it says you concoct a quest in which the party will travel to Waterdeep to follow the pilgrimage of 5 pools. You take your time, but even so, the story's ready in less than 0.25 seconds, and you end up waiting for the crew to finish preparing. So we can review the party stats, and it gives you like a little character sheet for each character. Eric has... Oh, I haven't done name generation yet either, so they're just using their own names. But they've got strength, intelligence, charisma, and stamina, which is kind of cool. And then on top of that are all of the crew's normal stats, which kind of come into play a little bit as well. These are kind of like random dice rolls offset by their stats, so it kind of gives them a bias towards what they're already good at, but a chance to be beyond that. So we continue, and then we tell the crew that in a small clearing outside Hedgewold, the party encounters a group of Aloran monks. There's no need to get too friendly, says Fallon, but it's meant to be as her character. Let's just offer them a curt nod. The Aloran monks greet the crew warmly, you say. I should probably say party rather than crew. Again, this is completely unfinished. You describe them bowing deeply, displaying the fins on their upper arms as a show of trust, and then I kind of imagine that anyway, I just wanted to do things that sound like they've got culture and sound like they've got interesting characteristics to them. They invite the party to join their camp and share a meal. After some brief discussion, the crew decides to join them and spends the evening swapping stories. You tell the crew that the monks have most recently come from completing the pilgrimage of 5 pools, where they were studying some of the less explored tunnels beneath the 5th pool. The party wakes early, and as the monks are preparing to leave, a smaller Aloran monk named Huark approaches Aslan and thanks them for sharing their hospitality. I thank her in return, says Aslan. You tell Aslan that Huark locks eyes with Aslan's character and slips a small book into their hand, mouthing, "I pray that you will know what to do," before returning to packing. I stow it in my pack until the monks are out of sight, says Aslan. And then the monks disappear. And yeah, so I want to have this idea of like presenting it as though you're describing the story and describing the world to the crew, and then the crew have to think about it. So you get all these moments of them going or what do I do, or trying to work out what they want to do. And that was specifically why I wanted to show, was like the crew working through problems without facing imminent death, which they do on the planets, right? Like, so you're making choices. I guess you're not really making any choices beyond setting up the scene for the crew, and I do want to give you some opportunities to like make it easier or harder for them depending upon how you feel. But ultimately the consequences are not high. The worst thing that can happen is a party wipe, and then next time this mission comes up, they'll make new characters. That's the main reason I haven't done the character generation stuff, is because I need to write some bits for generating new characters and having the characters track whether or not their character died in the last iteration of the mission, which is easy enough. I just haven't done it. So yeah, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the journal that they get talks about this like tunnel and door and stuff that those monks found that they weren't able to open beneath the 5th pool, oh man, I should have paid attention when I reviewed the character stats. It's meant to say what race they are as well, because they can be one of the 3 races, and so whether or not, if you have an Aloran person in the party, or if they have an Aloran person in the party, they can reference their history and stuff when they're talking about things.
I'd almost want to make it so that you can hover over them on the right and also see like the character. It'd be so cool.
I want to do like little like character sheet mementos of each character they'd made, but then the idea of like you run across this mission a dozen times or something, that person dies, and then you've just got a dozen character sheets sitting in the inventory. It's less interesting. But yeah, could be kind of fun to like rejig that and show their character name, or like replace their sprites. That could be kind of funny.
Yeah, definitely.
Replace them with
and
like
I think
I don't know if it's worth doing that level of work. But I really like the idea of this kind of giving the crew the opportunity to have some fun in a fictional world. So yeah, I'm not going to read the whole thing. But the party decides that they want to go to Waterdeep and do the pilgrimage themselves. If your crew is like if you've got a crew that's full of xenophobic people who don't have Aloran characters, then they might even decide to just not go, and then it ends there, because there's not really much you can do with that story if they decide to not go. But yeah, like how it all plays out is meant to be determined like super well, not super determined by who they are and what their traits are and stuff, but it does have a role. So the other thing that I want to do with this particular iteration of this mission, this particular configuration of story and stuff, was that each of the 5 pools works like reverse chronologically through the Aloran race's history, and talks about how they arrived at their philosophies and their style of governance and that sort of stuff. Oh, here we go. We can tell the crew to roll, or whether or not they can just read the journal without rolling every time. That's fine. We can read without rolling. Yeah, and this idea of like the 6th pool, which is what you end up finding. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so there's stuff I haven't written here for the different pools and what they do. and what they mean, but that will come eventually. So now you find the door, hooray! And you find a dark tunnel, and you emerge from the waters. Oh, hang on, no, wow, yeah, there's heaps of stuff missing here. There's things that I've written that aren't like expressed in the script. They're like written as comments in the mission script. But the idea is that we've found a dark tunnel and there's a door down there, and depending upon what challenge you picked at the very beginning, whether that's combat, riddles, or stealth, that will determine what you find down there. So if it's riddles, then you solve some puzzles, or the crew solves some puzzles. You don't get to do it, but you get to see the crew struggle with with their lack of intelligence. Or if you have combat, then maybe there'll be like some cool undead, ancient Eloran warriors or something that you got to defeat. Or if you pick stealth, then maybe there's some traps and things that you've got to navigate. But when you come back out, or when you get through the thing, you find that Eloran culture and Eloran history has this extra kind of forgotten element that that you're then able to well, that page is a bit long. That you're then able to bring to to the people's attention, and the monks, not the monks, what are they called, like the people who keep the pools clean. You tell them about it, and they're like, oh, that's it's interesting, and yeah, I just kind of dig that that idea of playing a little role in helping a culture understand more about itself. It's kind of fun. And then we can keep track of that, and we can reference that in future iterations of the mission as well. Oh yeah, and there are classes as well. Yeah, so we've got Arix, an Eloran scout, and Fallon's a Greenling warrior, and Korra is a Chijo mage, and wow, and Aslan was a Greenling scout. That's why she couldn't just read the journal without rolling, and you could tell her that she couldn't read it without rolling. But yeah, so that's how that mission plays out. It's kind of fun.
I think that's really cool. I remember reading a book, a Star Trek Enterprise book that kind of had that. They had a D&D session in it, and it would interchange from the D&D session to like the in-world actions that was happening on. So it was a good balance.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of almost in everything these days. It's like they have their D&D thing. Like I was watching the new Voltron, and they have a D&D episode in that. And what else were we watching a little while back where they had like it's pretty much D&D. But it's a cool opportunity for you to like let a bunch of characters express things in a different kind of context. I think that's interesting. So something else that's new in this update is the experience system. Now underneath the hood there are a bunch of hidden stats that the player never knows about, and kind of has no reason to know or care about. And my hope was, with this at least, was that we would... Oh, hang on. We're coming into this mission. I'm going to keep Arik. Arik's not coming. We're going to send 3 people. Who are we going to send? We'll send Osmond, Michael, and Aslan, I think, is probably a safe bet. This is the Robot Shakespeare mission, which is
yes, and
silver, I think.
It's probably like... Yeah, and it's one of my favorite missions. It was always between that and Titanium.
I like that.
But
I like it's kind of, at once it's irreverent in that it's absurd and it's kind of silly, but it's meant to be. Not only is this robot forcing scripts into your crew's hands and making them participate in a tragedy play, but the thing itself is meant to be a tragedy. This is the only way that the remnants of the AI of this ship can cope with the reality of the consequences of the decisions that their crew made, and that's kind of sad at the same time. So
Yeah.
it's kind of got this really cool balance of silliness and drama, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of there was actually a part in like near Automata that I was like, oh wow, I totally like captured that same essence of what they're trying to do. Of they had like the same thing of like someone's up robots up on stage and they're dealing with the death of their mother and they keep acting through it, and it's very dramatic in that sense, and I kind of really love that uh, tying together of like this comedic drama that you're just kind of forced to go through, because like all of a sudden now you're on, you're on this ship, and you're or well, space station slash used to be ship, um and yeah, you're just kind of having to go through it, and work with that crazy robot guy.
Yeah, it's it's interesting to see like different players' reactions to that, because like some people get that as their first mission. They're like, okay, so this is the game. But for other people, it comes like, you know, late in a run, and they're like, oh, I have this is totally unexpected. I have no idea what's going on. This is blowing my mind. Um,
Yep.
it's always interesting to see this kind of reactions. One thing about this sector screen as well that I didn't mention before was that previously when you click the light jump button, just like that, you're in the next scene, um, with the clock already ticking and everything already moving. And I was like, there's not quite enough of a break there between when you click the button and when you arrive in the thing. Like narratively, it's meant to be thousands of years. We can present it instantaneously because your AI experiences time differently to humans, but from like a gameplay pacing perspective, it always felt like there needed to be some kind of gap there to me. And so I put in a little animation where the ship slowly accelerates out of the sector when you hit the light jump button, which takes about, was it like quarter second, half a second, and then you get this prompt, and nothing happens until you hit resume. And I dig that. I dig the impact that has. I think it was a good addition.
Yeah, definitely. I think it gives it like a better pace in that sense of like not necessarily not necessarily going like uh constantly through these things where you're just flipping from um to the sectors. That's what we call them, sectors. I always am
Yeah,
jumping between sector and system. Um, but yeah, so we had like sector generation, things like that, and so it's almost much less like you're picking a point in space and like going really fast towards there. And I think before it really didn't capture that essence of like people were almost thinking that they were in the next sector over, or just like in the next block of space over, and that wasn't the case. And so people were like, can we go back to the sector I was in? And I was like, no, not really, because it's really really far away. But I think that definitely gives the better idea now.
yeah, and that's like a tricky thing. Like, should you let people go back? I mean, on one hand, it sounds like it's easy if you don't think about it much. It's easy to go, oh yeah, of course you let people go back, and then they can go to planets that they missed or whatever. And we set up the generations so that any planet that you miss has a chance to show up in the rotation in the future, which is kind of, I think, like the only aspect of the game that I think is worth prioritizing the mechanics of the game over the reality of what actually happens. I mean, I guess it's possible that um, no, it's not really possible that you would come across the same planet multiple times after doing the kind of jumps that you do. Um, but
Right. Yeah.
but I think it's still important because we don't have an infinite number of planets, and you could do an infinite number of jumps, and then what do you do? Yeah, what do you do when you run out of content?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I definitely want to like the thing with like allowing people to go back would be like, so you missed a planet on the first sector and you're 5 sectors in,
Yeah, yeah,
so
it's tough.
have fun trekking.
It's
you
like
know.
how much fuel you're gonna waste, how much food you're gonna waste, what kind of consequences do you have for going back? It's a tricky thing, and I think it runs counter to like the narrative goal of your mission, which is to like push on and find a new home. If you keep going back, then that's not getting you closer to that goal.
Right, definitely. And at least in my head, I was always thinking that if you saw a planet, you would definitely end up going to the planet, so that in the idea is that those are the planets that you haven't, discovered in past sectors and things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I
Which
think I think there
it
are
could
some
be a false
cases where
assumption, but
like that silver mission, you need three party members. I guess it's possible that you could have two, and then later on get a third one because there are a couple of characters that you can unlock during gameplay, and then come back and be able to do that mission where you previously couldn't. So you would at least know the planet name.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think the planet names are also really helpful, like run to run, where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, this is the planet that happens, with this stuff. So if I bring this, like you did earlier, actually,
Yeah, I didn't want to take
found.
Eric because I know that he dies, or he has a high
Oh yeah,
likelihood of
and
dying in that mission. Right.
yeah, exactly.
Depending upon how you frame death, maybe he doesn't die, but yeah, he doesn't stay on a crew, which is not great. Because I wanted him for something else. We're doing another one of these game night missions, and in this time, we've like agreed to help Naloran Spellsmith create this artifact, um, which is hard to make, and now he's sent us off to go and find um, different components for that thing. And I think, if I remember right, the order that you get the ingredients in is determined by the crew. They decide for themselves, and then you do the thing. Um, Again, lots of comments that haven't been filled out, but narratively, there's like um, someone like steals the artifact after it gets made, and then you've got to go off and find it again. But it turns out to be this thing that the dude who's making it is the only guy with the knowledge of how to make that kind of thing left. It's like lost stuff. Here's another one of the missions that I really like, which is it's the Rust mission, where your crew goes down onto a planet and finds some kind of consciousness altering substance in the atmosphere, or maybe it's not in the atmosphere. I don't know, but yeah, it makes them all very, very depressed. And that's like an interesting facet of their characters to explore, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think this one was inspired by kind of like a Stargate Atlantis episode of like they all uh, like jump into a planet and have almost kind of like effects from the planet affect them and whatnot. And so I think that was kind of like the biggest thing behind this game is like you have your crew, you get to learn about the crew itself and how they would react on these different missions. And so when you put them in a situation where their mind is altered, they're kind of going to the extremes of their personalities. And so it
Hmm.
kind of really helps you like find out who is who and what necessarily they'll act. Are they going to go crazy and shoot a bunch of people, if they're panicking, or are they going to go run off a cliff by themselves, or whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. It's really tricky. This is a mission that I wrote a bunch of content for, and it's a bunch of invisible content because I basically rewrote everything that was there already so that it would work with custom characters, because all this stuff is like really specific to these pre-made characters and who Michael wrote them to be. Um, but when you can have custom characters, we added in that custom character editor. I felt like we really needed to make sure that interesting stuff or stuff that felt interesting could happen. It didn't need to feel as interesting as these characters bits are. All the bits that I wrote are kind of like truncated versions of these, but they needed to feel different, because if you get the same stuff for every Cygen that you get for Fallon, that would be disappointing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I got to add in a few interesting things. I wanted to have, I think I wrote a variation for every occupation type. And then each one of those has some minor variances for other traits, which is pretty fun. Did Michael pick up the tennis ball? He did. There's a bit in there where it says that, like, tennis balls you can effectively eat because they're organic and you can stick them in the food processor and turn them into something yummy. So I was like, okay, well, maybe he does find a tennis ball. And we got a photo of the city and some red dust. Cool. Is that everything in this sector? It is. Alright, well, we're probably gonna...
I really like that sector.
That
Being
mission,
able to-
yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. Is there anything else? Like, we did a lot of work, and there's no way that we could have time to talk about all of it. But are there any other bits and pieces that you think are particularly interesting, or that you're particularly proud of that we put into the update?
I actually just wanted to ask you on, like, how do you feel about, your work going into this and how the overall experience was?
I really enjoyed the and this is also being thankful for the level of trust that you were comfortable giving me when I was working on stuff. But I really enjoyed that I could dive in and make assessments and make decisions about what I felt was needed or was important. And we discuss stuff, and we back and forth on what's worthwhile and what's not worthwhile. But generally speaking, I had as I mentioned at the very beginning, a fairly high degree of creative latitude, and that's always enjoyable for me. Like,
Yeah,
I enjoy working with constraints, but I also enjoy being able to set those constraints myself and being able to think about what they are. So in this case, as I said right at the beginning, I really wanted to. I think we'll leave Cora behind for this mission. Got a hunch she she might not do so well. Yeah, I always wanted to enhance what was there and focus on maintaining the experience, but make it improved. And I think that, like, that's the kind of restriction that you would put on someone as a project manager regardless, is that you would be like, hey, you got to stick to the kind of goals, you got to stick to the shared vision. But to be able to set to explore and experiment and kind of go what works, what doesn't work, was good. I enjoyed that.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely. And it was also really great giving you a little of that control, because it was really interesting to, I guess, really see, myself step away in that sense and be able to kind of allow someone with like a real design like aspect, kind of focusing on the bits of the game that they felt shine, versus where I feel like maybe some other parts shine as well, just in different sort of ways. And so you kind of just had that mix there of like being able to have multiple people just like enjoy different aspects of the game and focus on I guess kind of like those differences, and kind of let them shine themselves.
I think as well for me, um, having the skill set, you know, as an artist and as a writer and as a programmer, um, I yeah anything that I thought the game needed, I could I could implement, right? Like I wasn't necessarily um, making work for other people by coming up with ideas, um, and it's 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 kind of cool to be able to go, well, I think the game needs this thing, um, but I'm not entirely convinced, and then I can spend whatever amount of time I want to spend on it, um, working out whether or not it's a good fit before, I don't need to, what am I saying? Yeah, I just enjoy being able to go, here's the problem I think
Kind of
I've
having that
identified.
pulse.
I've got the skills to identify it. I've got the skills to implement it. I've got the skills to polish it up. To be able to like carry features through from end to end is kind of fun. I dig that.
Yeah, definitely. And that was also really great of like you were able to bring in, kind of like your own art assets to it and match the style and everything that not only in writing but in art and even code and stuff like that. And so that's really cool to kind of have, like, okay, I'm making a feature and it's gonna be put into the game and it's gonna have all the art and it's gonna have all the. It's like, okay, awesome, great, like.
So like that memento system that we were talking about before with the little things that the crew can pick up, that is probably the best example where I did all the art and I wrote all the descriptions and I put them all into the missions, and I also wrote all of the back end for tracking them and awarding them and stuff. Um,
Yeah,
but that, I mean, like that
that's a.
also, we didn't have a lot of resources. It was pretty much just you and me working on the game. And if I, as I said, if I don't have to make work for other people, then that frees you to work on stuff like the character editor or Steam Workshop integration and that sort of stuff. Um, which if if you had to do all the programming for the memento system, like maybe we wouldn't have gotten as much stuff done.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, and I definitely think it was a good um, balance in that sense.
Yeah. So here's a bit I added fairly recently. I had kind of wanted to do this in another mission that we didn't end up writing, or that I didn't end up writing. But in Arek's biography here, it says that he some of his old designs are used on board the ship, but he doesn't know about it. And in this mission, you've had a hull breach, and the crew goes EVA to help resolve it because your normal systems are not available. Your normal ways of dealing with these kinds of things, or something weird has gone on, and you need your crew's help. And because the crew isn't really meant to interact with any of the ship's systems directly, they're all stored on or they're all positioned on the exterior of the ship, or installed. Installed is a good word. They're all installed on the exterior of the ship, and so you go out there. And before it was like any mechanic character, anybody who's like got that kind of engineering bent, would kind of be excited by seeing the outside of the ship and go, wow, here's all the cool stuff, Um, but there was a grammar bug in it that I saw, like a week ago or something, and I was like, hey, you know what? This bit of like addressing Arek's designs being used on the ship, that's something I wanted to slip in there in a different mission, but maybe there's room here. So right now he's noticed, and you can either make a joke to try and distract him, or you can just tell him that you're not going to talk about it until later. But he's like, some of these are mine designs or variations of them at least, and he seems a little bit concerned. Now Arek is meant to be portrayed as being on the apologies to anybody because I'm not super versed on the appropriate terminology for these things. But he's written as though he's meant to be on the is it the autistic spectrum? I'm I'm sure I'm going to use the wrong terms, and apologies if I do. But yeah, this idea of like, how does he respond to humor? How does he respond to distraction? Is he like that focused that that he's not going to let it go? Autism spectrum. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nevik. And so, you know, I want to say, do you try and joke with him, or do you just put down a straight order that says, look, we don't have time to worry about this, which we'll do, and then we continue on through the mission, and Arik drops it, but later on he's going to come back and ask us about it. Oh, boo.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh wait, no, is Cora going to do it? No, she didn't. So there's a bit here where you've got like a breach repair kit, and you have the bonding agent dispenser, and that's like stored as a variable. If you've got a comedian on the crew, unfortunately Aslan died in the last mission. If you've got a comedian on the crew, they'll insist on calling it the breach blaster, and so from the rest of the mission it's referred to as a breach blaster, which I kind of enjoy that. There's also a chance here that a crew member might become detached from the hull and float away in space, and risks being lost. But there's this bit where they can they're like floating away from the ship, just kind of commenting on everything that the crew is doing, and feeling left out. Like it's kind of fun. Oh, okay, here we go. So Arik is like, so how many of our designs are on the ship? And you're like, well, about this much, and you're trying to explain that, different organizations acquired research from stuff, and things that Arik had worked on had been brought on board as like during the late stages of the Argo's construction, and he's like, he just doesn't seem satisfied. He's asking why he wasn't told, and you have the option to say you don't know, or that he didn't need to know, or that it was for his own good, and all of these are kind of like framed as you speculating. So we say like, say it was for your own good, and we'll say like, that we calculate a higher probability of stronger crew performance and lower stress rates if he didn't have awareness, and that maybe that was done with his best interests at heart. And then he's like, well, like, is this why I'm on the ship? Am I the only here because the designs, am I only on this ship because my designs are being used? And then again, you've got the opportunity to respond a couple of different ways. Character dialogue is not my strong suit, so I always feel anxious when I put character dialogue in. I feel like I'm not really good at maintaining characterization. Like, can do speech affectations, that's easy, but like to give the sense of a specific person and a specific person's thoughts being expressed through dialogue, I feel like I'm not great at that. But hopefully it's enough here. But yeah, you can say like, is he only here because his designs are here? And I'm gonna say I don't know. And you say like, the entire crew has access to the same technical manuals. In the unlikely event that one of the ship's components or systems need attention without my supervision, any one of you could handle it. You went through the same selection processes of every other crew member, and as expected, you've proven yourself to be a valuable addition to the crew. So it says that you sense that Arik is willing to let it drop. But in your study of the crew's emotional dynamics, you understand that you can and perhaps should say more. And you can say, regardless, I'm glad that you're here, and I believe that the rest of the crew feels the same. And then Arik says thanks, and he just says that it was a surprise to see all his old stuff. And that kind of closes that little narrative thread that we had dangling there, in a way that I hope is fitting and interesting. But yeah, we might.
Yeah, I think it's really.
Oh, go ahead.
Uh, I was gonna say, I think it's really satisfying to be able to kind of see that in the biography and kind of connect that to an event in game.
Yeah, yeah. It always felt like a kind of, you know, a loose thread for me, and was always something I wanted to come back to, but kind of never really had the time. It wasn't really worth you know, delaying release for to make happen. It's another mission. I love all the missions. I think they're all great, but this is the gold mission where you find the tar planet, which is cool. But yeah, after this mission, we might wrap it up and move on to another game. Was there anything you wanted to add in closing? Oh, hang on, this isn't the Rust plant. I'm not paying attention. This is a different one.
Yeah, I think I just want to say it was great talking, and that it was great to be able to kind of go through all these different aspects of the game, kind of reveal a little bit of secrets about them, a little bit of history behind them, whatnot.
Yeah, it's been a bunch of fun, and also thanks for letting me work on your game. I had a blast, and and I'm pretty proud of what we managed to pull together.
Yeah. I'm definitely, yeah. Thank you very much for working on my game, or our game, or
I guess it is our game now. Because that was the thing. I don't normally do contract work or cover contract work in these streams, but because I had, just because like usually I'm working on stuff that I don't have any choice in what I'm working on. I don't have any decision making powers in what I get to do and what I don't get to do. But in this case, I was more than just interchangeable labor component. I was contributing creative decisions to what we ended up doing. So yeah, all right, here we go. We're looking for a faster way out. We're gonna see if it's a closet. It's a closet. We wiped the entire crew. Hooray!
Oh no.
It's like
a good way to go out.
that second story mission has some some harsh endings. But like that was another thing I went and did and added in, was like a whole bunch of extra bits in missions where I think it's this one. No, it's not this one. It's the next story mission where if there's only one character left, or maybe it's a previous one, the one where you've got to like hold the rod in. There was no kind of handling for whether the person holding the rod, who would have to hold the rod, was the last crew member. And so I had to write a whole bunch of endings for a whole bunch of different characters. If they were the last one left on this planet where the gravity well was strong enough that the ship couldn't get away, and there was no way for the crew to get off the planet anyway. So you just kind of sit there until the ship orbit decays and the last remaining crew member starves to death on the planet. Like, I think it's kind of interesting existential moment that I was able to push out for a bunch of different characters. Oh, yeah, and this as well. Like, when you died, we just used to go straight back to the menu.
Yeah, exactly.
And now that we've got,
that gives a really good wrap up.
Yeah, now that we've got this screen, we can say how everyone died and why they died, instead of that being something that you might skip over and not quite understand, which I think some people have had, but it's always tricky. You never know how much attention different people are going to play to different amounts.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, that was the away team. Oh, and the credits are new. We never had in-game credits before.
Right, yeah.
I wanted to do something with like parallaxing starfield backgrounds. I just feel like the animation on this looked way better when we were at double the resolution, but it wasn't really worth sacrificing the improved graphical quality for the rest of the game. It doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, I like it. It's really yeah, I can't believe it took so long for credits to get in, but
It's one of those things,
we
like
always just had that web page.
how do you give attention to a feature like that when there's other work to be done, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, on one hand, the only driving force I ever have for putting credits in my games is that there are people that I feel responsible for, you know, thanking or whatever. And so now I make sure that and also I do this Patreon thing, and I've said that I will you know, include people in credits as part of that. So I've kind of got an obligation there to do that. So now it's one of the first things I do. But when you're working on a project and you're kind of going, well, all right, do I spend a day implementing credits, or do I spend a day adding some feature that the game needs? You know, what do you where do you get that day from? What feature loses out, or what development aspect loses a day for you to implement in credits or whatever? And that's a hard decision to make. Even though it sounds like a small thing, you know, it still eats a bunch of time. It's hard to prioritize. So I understand why it wasn't there. It kind of made sense.
Yeah, and I guess like the whole thing of like we you know had credits for it, like it just kind of like pushed you to a website rather than
Yeah.
you know, in game, and so
I think
that
before
was
I
always
came
kinda
on board, there was no credits button. I was like, well, I know how to
oh,
open
that's
a
right.
website,
Yeah.
so we added that in. But yeah.
Yeah.
It's all good. Well, thank you again for joining me. I'm gonna wrap up the OA team here. It's been a bunch of fun having a chat. I'm sure we will talk again at some point soon.
Yeah.
Oh, Nivik hasn't played since we put the new menu in. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by chat. Yeah,
Oh.
we were like, we need more buttons, man. We're gonna have more buttons. Back up the truck. So
Yeah.
so we decided that a horizontal layout was a bit better and kind of gave this more open sense of you know, emptiness, I guess, which is sort of a bit of a theme in the game, is that space is kind of empty.
Yeah, exactly. And it definitely helped us kind of like give that difference of like, hey, this isn't, you know, the base game. This is the Lost Exodus, you know, patch update, you know, 2 years after.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you again. I'll hang up now. But yeah,
All right.
I'll catch you later.
All right. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye.
Alrighty. I hope that was interesting, or an interesting discussion of the OA team and some of the work that I did on it and some of the work that Michael did on it. We mentioned another Michael. There were multiple Michaels that contributed to the project, so apologies if that got confusing at any point. But hopefully it made sense. The next game that I wanted to talk about is an unfinished game, which, you know, sometimes the reality is that I don't get quite as much time as I'd like to work on things, and 2018 was definitely a a big year for that kind of thing. But I did make a start on a sequel to The Spicy Meatball Saves the Day. It was very last moment, and my rationale for doing it was that it would allow me to what am I saying? It would allow me to something. It would allow me to do some engine work that that I otherwise might not get to do. Unfortunately, the way that the stream works here is that I can't show the game until the splash screen is finished displaying. But since the splash screen is a funny part of the you know, or funny or interesting part of the the whole thing, I want to show that off. So bear with me a second while I open that up. Sprites, Spicy Meatball 2 splash screen. Let me switch back over here. Nope, wrong screen. There we go. Okay. Yoink. So yeah, it's called The Spicy Meatball Finds a Way, and I started it for 7-day FPS last year. And the title screen gag, I wanted to have a like a villain type thing, and I was like, oh, like maybe I think the first idea I had was like it was going to be Jake Ate Steaks, because I thought that was like a silly, ambiguous pun. Um, but that never really kind of went anywhere. And my original vision for this was that I was gonna set up the spicy meatball for inconsistently timed episodic content. I didn't. I was thinking, it would be good if the engine supported like modular content, so you could like just drop a new resources folder in and have it show up as like another chapter in the menu or something like that. And I was like, well, how do I go about setting up the spicy meatball to be able to do that? And I went to the process of even like doing a map of the wow, that looks like garbage. Um, of the environment, the city that the spicy meatball takes place in, um, and was like, okay, well, like, where would things be if I say that you're flying south in the first game across this suburb and then you go to this place? Like, how do I what layout kind of makes sense for that? And so I was gonna like be able to introduce a bunch of locations that maybe I could add in later versions of the. Oh, you know what? While we're here, it's off topic, but yoink, yoink, yoink. There's a piece of concept art I did for the away team, which is nice and a bunch of fun. But what was I saying? Yeah, so I was gonna. The idea was like I was gonna do like a short story that just introduced a whole bunch of places, and had a little bit of drama in it, and a little bit of comedy in it, but primarily it would be about it would have a sequence where you could like fly around the town and go to different places, and some of those might not be relevant to the current story, but that would be setting up the mechanics and whatever for being able to do future spicy meatball games. And the whole thing, and like I'm not abandoning this idea, but eventually I decided that this didn't make sense for a sequel. But I had this idea of like when I first started making the spicy meatball, in my mind I was hoping to explore this sense of what does it mean when you're a superhero doing day-to-day, everyday stuff in an adventure game type context. Like what if you're doing your laundry, but all of your verbs are like kapow and baff and zap and stuff. Like what if what if you've only got these kind of like over the top superpowers, and you have no finesse. Like that's kind of like a funny, interesting environment to explore. And with the original Spicy Meatball, I ended up abandoning that for exploring the idea of what happens if you're a superhero that is made vulnerable by losing all your cool superhero tools. And when I think about what people appreciate about Spicy Meatball, I'm like, it's not that original concept that I didn't make. So if I'm going to make a sequel, it makes sense to focus on, and this is like a thing that I think almost every creative person struggles with when they're making a follow up to something, is like when you're trying to capture what you're trying to capture the essence of something you made. Often it's not the essence of your original intentions. It's the essence of your output, and so understanding the difference between that allows you to do a lot more stuff. So with that in mind, I wrote a different story, which focuses on, because like I was like, what are the things that make the Spicy Meatball Saves the Day interesting? I think there is, people say that they appreciate the comedy. I don't think there's much comedy in it, but obviously what there is enough. Um, it is non-linear. It has a very small number of rooms, but I think the non-linearity is quite dense. Like there are a whole bunch of different paths you can take, and all of the spaces ended up getting reused and having different context depending upon the order that you discover them in. And the other thing is that you are kind of, you're vulnerable. You're at risk. I think those are the kind of like the three main takeaways after sitting back and thinking about the Spicy Meatball and thinking about some of the feedback I've gotten from it. That those were the things that sort of stood out. So with that in mind, we end up with the Spicy Meatball Finds a Way, which is this cool game here. Now there's, with any icicle game, like the game is, the interface is inherently disorienting, and that's not bad. It's not a bad thing, but it does mean that that I need to give players a space to work out the controls before they dive into the rest of the game, right? I want to give you a space where you're kind of safe and you're comfortable. Especially if I want the player to feel like they're vulnerable, I want to separate that from the main part of the narrative, and the way that I did that was, let me turn that down just a little, was by having a kind of flashback to the first game. It's like this is bits of the same text from the original intro, but it's got these beats where it says, this is kind of weird and familiar, just to make sure that even though it is reusing some of the content from the first game, that it narratively feels like it's interesting. So I'm not going to read that because I read that last year. But yeah, basically I end up reusing the fire scene from the first game, but it's framed as though it's like a weird dream, or a flashback or something. So we're in front of a burning building. Onlookers crowd around as police cars screech to a halt nearby. A man cries out and runs towards you saying, "My son! My son!" Helps if I have the game selected. So we get the burning building here. We see the distraught man. We say, "What's up?" And the man explains to you that his young son is trapped inside the building, possibly on the first floor. And then we talk to the police officers and firefighters. The police officers explain that they've cordoned off the block and will be removing the onlookers soon. The firefighters explain that it's too late to save the building and that you should be very careful if you choose to go inside. One recommends the roof, one recommends the front door, and third recommends the first floor window. And so when we face the building again, we can either go through the front door, or we can, where's the window? There's a window. We can use that grappling hook, or we can jump onto the roof. And I think we're going to use the window. Woo! Your grappling hook sails smoothly through the air and lodges firmly in the brickwork behind the window. That bit is from the first game. It says you begin to climb, but the cable gets longer and longer, stretching off into infinity before you black out. So that was all kind of like a dream thing, which is cool. You wake to hear a maniacal voice booming over a high-pitched whine. It's the expositionist. Yeah, that was the joke. In the first one I had like the ineffable F because it's like a funny name, which is a cool gag. Funny names are always cool gags. But the idea of like having the expositionist being this character that over-explains all of their plans. I think in the early draft they were called the over-explainer, but the expositionist is kind of funnier. And he says, "Because you see, Spicy Meatball, I did my research, and I know just how long I'd need to talk in order to be gloating as you regained consciousness." Who's more prepared now, Meatball? Me or the superhero currently tied to the table of imminent demise? So we look up, and your bright lights are shining down from above and temporarily blinding us. We're on a table. You are still groggy, but you can make out bright lights above you and some kind of bonds around your hands and feet. A loud, high-pitched whine threatens to overwhelm your senses as much as the saw blades emitting it threatened your limbs. So you're tied down to a table. There is circular saw blades coming at you. This is like very kind of typical villainous behavior. We've been kidnapped. And the first bit was like this kind of dream sequence that we had before we woke up. So we can see our right wrist here. It says that the rope is tied tightly around our wrist. I'm not going to interact with this just yet. I want to have a look around and see what the go is before we engage in such shenanigans. So we see a large circular saw blade. The saw blade shines brightly in the lamplight, its keen edge ready to slice whatever lies upon the table. Unfortunately, in this case, that would be you. The saw blade is suspended from the ceiling via an arm that is moving, ever closer to you. We see a blue door. The door has no visible handles, but it does have a round window. Unfortunately, the window is frosted and you can't see anything inside. We look at our feet. A tightly wrapped rope, tied rope is wrapped around our bare feet. That means that we don't have our cool boots from the first game. And this was kind of the thing that I wanted to do with this game, was go... In the first game, it was like, you've got some cool superhero abilities, and then through the course of the game, you lose them, and you become more vulnerable. Like, you have to weigh up how to use your equipment. And then in this I was like, well, what if you start off with no equipment and then you find your stuff and that enables you to do more. So kind of flipping that on its head. If we look down, we can crane our neck to look at the table. Out of the corner of the eye you can only see the table is dark and made of metal. So we'll keep looking around. We've already seen the blue door. Looking this way. There's another saw blade. Rust taints the chrome of the saw blade as it spins, but you're entirely confident that, blunt as it may be, it's capable of cutting through your stunning costume and the legs contained within. The saw blade is suspended from the ceiling via an arm that is moving ever closer to you. We see a green trimmed door. It's reinforced and has a large biohazard symbol on it, and it is slightly ajar. Alright, we see our left wrist. It says the rope is poorly tied, so let's try wriggling out. You wriggle your left wrist. You wrench your arm vigorously from side to side. Your left wrist isn't free, but you think you've loosened the rope a little. A poorly tied rope is wrapped around your wrist. The rope is very loose. Let's wriggle again. You wriggle your left wrist some more. With the rope a little looser, you're able to pull your hand free. The saw blades draw closer. Inexorably, the saw blades and imminent death slide nearer. Okay, so things are getting louder. Let's go look at our other hand. Maybe we can untie this now. You untie your right wrist with your... Oh, I should say left hand. I wrote some of this last night. With your left hand free, you make short work of the knot, and the rope falls away. That should have made things louder again. Again. This is unfinished. So we bend forward to look at our feet. Our rope is wrapped around our bare feet, so we'll untie that. Whoa! You sit up and untie the perfect bow restraining your feet. As you do, the saw blades slow down and you hear the expositionist mutter something lengthy about the quality of contemporary knotmanship. Alright, so we're in the room. All that lovely droning noise has stopped. And we can I think we can go out these doors now. Yeah, do we want to go blue or green? The green door is already ajar. I'm thinking I didn't save a couple of changes that I made. So let's go through the blue door, since the blue door has an actual description. And that's kind of Unspeakable horrors lying beyond this door. And so let's not speak of them. That's as far as the polished parts of the story are available in the game. But I like this idea of having like a series of traps to get through. Um, so as you saw in that placeholder text, the green room is an acid room. The blue room is a water tank full of sharks. Like super cliche stuff. Um, yeah, I think you'll walk into the acid room and there'll be like a noose on the ground, and or a little loop of rope on the ground. You get drawn up and hung upside down over a pit of acid or something. Like, try to do all this kind of cliche stuff. Um, yeah, so that's kind of as far as is playable there. Um, but I can very briefly give you another look. Is it going to come up? Oh, there we go. We can see the splash screen now. Go to the editor. This is what the new editor looks like these days. We now have scenes are now round. They used to be square, and exits are now depicted in ways that preserve or at least give indications of what direction the exits lead out of the room, whereas it never used to. But yeah, there's a couple more rooms going on that you haven't seen that will make an appearance in the full game when I get around to finishing it. But for now, this has been kind of like a slow burn project with all the other stuff I've had going on, but it has resulted in a bunch of editor changes and a bunch of cool things. So if we look here, I can now go. I have like an autocomplete thing where instead of typing out like a really long one, I can just press tab to do that, which is kind of cool. And I fixed a bunch of other bugs in the puzzle editor and the scene editor and stuff. And that's what the buzzsaw room looks like. Yeah, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess I just missed it. Anyway, that's that was Spicy Meatball Saves the Day. I hope that was interesting. All right, the final thing that we're gonna look at is called Ruben the Claw Troll, which is a Hand of Fate 2 mod um, that I started. I initially started work on it as part of you're like testing out the mod tools before we release them to everybody. But it kind of grew into something else, you know. Um, yeah, I haven't really kind of sorted out my layout, but yeah, let me just check. I think this is a mod-enabled save. Yeah, sweet. All right. So Ruben the Claw Troll. Um, I have. Oh, actually, I need both Rubens. I don't think it matters what order they come in, but yeah, I think we need to load this one first anyway. So in like the original mod as I made it was a list. Oh, not a list. A chain of 7 encounters that explore some of what it's like to have a pet in your life. And these are based on a lot of my personal experiences. You can I did a write up on this on my Patreon page. You can find I think there's a link to that somewhere here in the description. I don't know. There should be. If not, I will add one. But yeah. So my dad had a Labrador named Frodo, and he got up to a lot of stuff. And this mod is a celebration of his life, really. So in addition to having the come back. In addition to having the Ruben the Claw Troll Encounter Chain, I also released a second mod which allows you to play those as a single challenge. And in my mind, that's not the best way to play it. The best way to play it is to play it as part of the game, where it's just another encounter chain that you put in and experience like in small chunks across many playthroughs, as opposed to experiencing it all at once during one playthrough. But this all at once during one playthrough thing is a lot better fit for streaming, so yeah, I know. Shh. So yeah, I wanted to have this challenge version available. So as we push through, keep in mind that it's kind of yeah, this is not necessarily the intended experience, and it's a little bit more packed together than I would expect. So I did all of my own card art for this. This challenge card art was based on a sketch that my partner Min did on showing the what am I saying? Yeah, she liked the character of Ruben and drew some little stuff, and I liked that one, so I kept it as the thing. So we can have a companion. Companion doesn't really do anything. You need some equipment just for the sake of things working and behaving mechanically as Hand of Fate expects them to work. There is no combat in this. It is entirely a narrative experience, and it has all of the gambit types that the game has, but then also for this challenge version, it disables all of the card tokens, so you can play it all in one go, but if you want to unlock the rewards, you gotta play it properly. So let us continue. Yeah, Frodo. My dad got Frodo after I'd moved out of home. Which yeah, so he was never really my dog. But you know, I got to see him frequently enough that he still had a fairly big presence in my life. You know, I saw my dad a couple of times a week. There was a point where I think I was at a TAFE college at the time, and I would cycle down to my dad's house at like 6 a.m. do the second morning walk with him, and then we would ride into to school together because he was a teacher there. But yeah, anyway, this is like narratively, it's abstracted from that. Like, there's no, you know, Frodo isn't a character explicitly in this, but it is based on pretty much everything that happens is based on something that happened in real life. So, a busy life. Your adventures take you to many lands, a life of passing through various villages, meandering across so many mountains, and delving into deep dungeons leaves far less time for friends and acquaintances than you would like. The friends you do have are precious to you, and you make special effort to see them when the opportunity arises. A day with Ruben. There he is. Silly idiot. You bump into your old friend Hearn while passing through Rudditch. After catching up on old times, Hearn asks if you would be willing to do him a favour by looking after his claw troll cub Ruben while he travels to a village of Drapier to attend an annual farmers' council. You figure you could use a short break and climb aboard Hearn's cart. Curled up asleep in the back is a tiny claw troll cub. Hearn explains that although he didn't initially plan on having a claw troll, he couldn't imagine life without a little Ruben running around. Ruben wakes as the cart arrives at Hearn's house, and after being properly introduced, follows you around. as you help Hearn load up his cart for the trip to Dropia. Hearn asks if you can keep an eye out for stuffed toys. Ruben has been showing up with them, but he can't work out where they're coming from. After waving Hearn off, you suddenly realise that Ruben is nowhere to be seen. We can search the garden, search the yard, or search the house. I think we might search the house. You check every room, but aside from some chewed-on door frames, there is no sign of Ruben. We return to the front door. You return to where you last saw Ruben, and sitting on the front step is a large stuffed toy. Sitting next to the toy is a small claw troll cub. I'm not very good at saying that. I should be more practiced, but unfortunately it still eludes me, wriggling with happiness as you approach. So we can pick up Ruben, or we can pick up the stuffed toy. I think we can pick up Ruben. You pick up Ruben, who licks your face, pinches your arm, and then wriggles his way free, scampering outside with gleeful grunts. You place the toy on a table by the door and hurry after him. So we're gonna search the garden. You wade through Hearn's flower beds, but the only tracks there are the ones that you make. So return to the front door. Once again, a large stuffed toy sits before us, and once again, a tiny Ruben wriggles with joy. We're going to pick up the stuffed toy this time. The toy is a spider with suspiciously few legs. As you pick up the toy, you watch Ruben closely, who makes some happy grunts and waddles outside. Prepared now, you manage to keep up with Ruben until he dives into a hole a short way past the garden bed. We can wait by the hole, or we can return to the front door. I think we'll wait by the hole. You linger by the hole and hear a faint scrambling sound as Ruben works his way through a tight underground tunnel. A short distance away, on the far side of the neighbour's fence, Ruben's happy face pops out of the ground. Once he's sure that you're watching, Ruben struts towards a neighbour's house, clambers on top of some bins, and pauses to warble at you before jumping through an open window. We'll knock on the door. Excuse me. You make your way quickly to the front door of the neighbouring house and knock loudly. Nobody answers the door, but you do hear some startled grunts and some thumps that sound awfully like a claw troll cub tumbling down some stairs. You make your way back to the hole in Hearn's garden in time to glimpse the stuffed toy disappearing into the hole on the other side of the fence. Before long, what looks like a large stuffed unicorn with a detached horn is shoved out of the hole, closely followed by a happy face. Ruben trots proudly around his prize and then sits next to it with a plop. Let's look for something to block the hole with. You spot a thin iron sheet leaning against the house and some rocks around the garden that you could use to weigh it down. You pick up the sheet of iron and attempt to drag it towards the hole, with Ruben weaving between your legs. That's something that Frodo did all the time. He would constantly... I was not paying attention. He would constantly just get underfoot. Always wanted to be touching you, always wanted to be occupying the same space as you. And tripping over Frodo was a very common occurrence. If you get a failure there, you'll trip over Ruben and potentially hurt yourself. He's fine. With the iron now covering the hole, you're able to quickly pile some rocks on it before Ruben realizes he could lift it. You walk towards the house. Ruben sniffs the iron sheet and grunts before following you. Ruben waddles over to his bowl and sits down, grunting to get your attention. By now it's midday, and you find your own stomach rumbling too. You consider food options. So this portion of the encounter is repeated throughout all the encounters. I wanted to give the sense of a routine, of like a daily life of just eating food and hanging out. Excuse me, it's itchy nose. So we can feed Ruben a treat, a snack, or a meal. I think we might give him a treat. You rummage around in Hearn's pantry until you find a jar labelled Ruben Treats, filled with dried berries. Behind you, Ruben is warbling. You turn to find him intensely staring at you with a string of drool hanging out of each corner of his mouth. Frodo is very good at making the shoelaces. You throw him two, which he delightedly pounces on. His warbles interrupted as he chews and swallows. You sneak one for yourself. They're quite good. There's still time left in the day, and Ruben is a seemingly endless font of energy and enthusiasm. We can go and throw a stick, we can go for a walk, we can sit on the porch, or we can play with a ball. I quite like going for a walk, so we'll go for a walk. The moment you take Ruben's walking harness off the wall, he starts hopping in circles while warbling. Eventually, he stops moving long enough for you to put it on, and the two of you set off down the street. After a short distance, you come to a crossroad. Hey, we found an old pasty. As you walk along the back alley, Ruben pulls hard on his harness, dragging you to a half-eaten pasty. In spite of your protests, Ruben insists on eating it. It's something Frodo always did, as he had a nose for finding leftover food on the side of the footpath or whatever, and would always want to eat it. There was a time when my dad lived, sort of diagonally across the road from a fast food place, and yeah, always finding chips to eat on the ground. You decide whether to continue the walk or take Ruben home. Let's continue walking. Ruben will demand that we continue walking regardless of what you pick there. Excuse me. Gotta stay hydrated. Ruben models as far forward as his harness will allow, eager to begin the next leg. After a short distance, you come to a crossroad. We found a hill. As you walk along the hill, as you walk along the trail leading to the top of Stevenson's Hill, Stevenson's Bend is a place along a river that I used to go to near here, where I would take photos in the sunset. How nice. Eagerly, Ruben breaks into a trot. You jog alongside him until you reach the crest of a hill, where you pause to rest while Ruben drinks what must be more than his own weight in water from a pond. Frodo would eat and drink more than I ever imagined anything of his size could. I mean, he was not a small dog, but just his ability to consume stuff was amazing. Alright, one more walk. Where are we going now? Let's see if we can get to the market. No, we're going to the hill again. Good times. We'll go again. There's that market. As you walk down one of the main market streets, people stop to pet Ruben, who gleefully accepts the attention while pinching at their bootlaces with his claws. You tried Ruben, but he ignores you and nobody seems to mind. Frodo would always stick his nose in random people's crotches, and he'd be like, "Hey, come on, don't do that." And invariably, everyone would be totally happy with it. And you're like, I mean, that's... it's not something that, you kind of expect. Are we going to keep walking? No, we're going to go home now. You make your way back to Hearn's house with the yawning Ruben in tow. Before long, you hear the sound of clopping hooves and squeaking wheels as Hearn returns from Dropia. Ruben presses his face against the window to watch, letting out a happy warble that fogs up the glass whenever Hearn waves to him. The front windows on that house were just at a certain height where the nose, a wet dog nose, he'd press it up against the window, and it would just be covered in kind of dog drool. You clean it, but within a day or two, it'd just be covered in dog drool again. Good times. You help Hearn unload the cart and tell him that about the stuffed toys. Hearn laughs so hard he spills a crate of apples, which Ruben rushes to help clean up. Hearn thanks you for looking after Ruben and offers you some exotic fruits he brought back with him. So, the stuffed toy thing, this Frodo was like this tall kind of thing. Still a tiny puppy, and every day he would come home with he'd be let out in the yard to play, and he'd disappear. And actually, I think there were cat flaps on that house, and he could get outside whenever he wanted. But the yard was pretty solid, and presumably the fence was as well. He dug a hole under the fence and was sneaking in through a neighbour's cat flap, eating all their cat food, and then that was the other thing, is that Dad would be like, these stuffed toys, where the hell are they coming from? The people living nearby didn't have kids, and one was this elderly couple, and it turned out that he was going upstairs into a playroom that these people kept for their grandkids, and getting into their toy box and taking a stuffed toy and dragging it back out the cat flap through the hole in the ground, and then yeah, back into Dad's house. And he was like, these look like new toys. They don't look like things that have been sitting out in the middle of, in the weather, abandoned on the side of the road for a few months, kind of thing. Like they were fresh toys he was getting. And it turned out that those people were on holiday and they didn't know. Nobody had seen him, but the person who was feeding their cat while they were away was like, "Wow, the cat is just eating so much food." He's like, not just eating, not just grabbing the stuffed toys. He's just eating all the cat food as well. It's good times. Time passes. A couple of years pass, and every time your adventures take you through Redditch, you're amazed at how much Ruben has grown. Hey, we got 10 food. Nice. We don't really need resources here. You hear an odd noise behind you as you walk along an empty road. Turning around, you see Hearn's cart approaching. He calls out and asks if you'd like to join him and Ruben for a trip to the beach. My dad lives on a yacht now. He was always into sailing, but Frodo was often on the boat or at the beach with us. So that's where some of this comes from. The cart rocks back and forth wildly as you climb onto it, thanks to growing Ruben's happy wriggling. After giving you a friendly lick, he settles down and Hearn gives the reins a flick. The moment the cart starts moving, Ruben lets out a long warbling wail which terminates into a loud yawn. Hearn tells you that Ruben has always done this. Since he is eager to get in the cart to begin with, he can't be too unhappy. Frodo had this thing, like whenever he was in the car, he'd make these noises. He'd be like, and like that, just constantly. But he loved getting in the car, and was just, I don't know, I guess he was happy. That was how he expressed that he was happy to be in the car, but just like, for hours, he would do it, just constantly. It was a weird sound, but, yeah. Weird dog. The cart trundles across the countryside, accompanied by Ruben's apparently happy wailing and blubbering. Eventually you arrive at the bay just past Taran. All of these place names are place names in Hand of Fate 2. If you're playing this in another language, I suspect it will use the localized versions of those, because I'm using the existing string IDs rather than hard coding them. So that must be exciting if you're doing that. On the north side, a bluff juts out into the ocean, offering protection from the wind and waves. To the south, the beach curves away. A pier occupied by a fisherman extends across the water. Hearn sets himself up on the beach with a book and says that you're welcome to take Ruben for a walk or a swim, or join him on the beach when you're done. In reality, Dad would be sailing, and I would be looking after Frodo, or we would be having lunch and stuff. Dad didn't usually spend much time sitting on a beach reading. The sea breeze tugs at your clothes as you look up across the bay. We can go for a swim, we can walk along the pier, or we can walk along the beach. I think we might walk along the pier. You walk down the pier with Ruben in tow, nodding to the fisherman as you approach. You stand at the end of the pier. We can look for sea creatures. You lie on the pier and look into the water below. Ruben lies next to you and watches intently. A bloom of jellyfish drifts by. Ruben watches one near the surface and wriggles happily when they get close. Let's look for more. A large manta ray flaps past gratefully. Ruben gets up and follows along the pier until it changes direction. Let's soak our feet. You sit down on the opposite side of the pier from the fisherman, take off your boots, and dip them in the cool water. After sitting with you for a few moments, Ruben decides to make friends with the fisherman. You offer to take Ruben away if he's a bother, but the fisherman pats Ruben good-naturedly and said he doesn't mind. This is a true story. Ruben sits quietly next to the fisherman. You begin to suspect something, that he might be sitting too quietly, and you turn to find him sneakily eating from a bucket of bait. You apologise profusely to the fisherman, who says that the bait was old anyway, and leaves to retrieve another bucket from a cart parked near Hearn's. Ruben burps contentedly. He did that. He freaking did that. We'd sailed up to Deviot from Launceston here, which is, I don't know, maybe 2-3 hours sail, I guess. and we'd moored at this pontoon, and there was a fisherman on the pontoon, and we were like, oh, we got the dog. If he's trouble, just let us know. He was like, no, it's all good. And we went onto the beach and ate lunch. So we were like, 50, 100 meters away. And Frodo was like, the boat's his home, so he like ran back along the pontoon and went on the boat and does whatever he does. Probably ate some food. If he wanted water, then there would be water on the boat. So him running up and down the pontoon was fine. But he stopped to sit between the fisherman's legs while the dude was fishing, and he's like, oh, that's fine. Give him a pat and whatever. And he wanders around and just sits down and watches for a while, and then I saw it happening. It was so far away we couldn't do anything. You shout at him and go, no, stop. But I got some photos. But he just fucking put his head right straight down into that the dude's pile of bait and ate most of it before the dude noticed. It was good times. So we're going to return to the beach. As you get close to the shore, Ruben runs into the water and stands still, looking into the distance as though he's forgotten something. You always do that. You just like splash around and make a big thing and then just stop. Until you said something and then he'd snap out of it. But he's this weird kind of staring into the half distance thing. You call to Ruben and he snaps out of it, warbling and breaking into a run as soon as he sees you. Let's go for a swim. You find a nice spot on the beach, drop your pack and strip down to swim while Ruben runs ahead in the shallows. You step into the bay. Let's swim further out. You swim further out into the bay, Ruben following along behind. Ruben swims in circles around you as you tread water. Swim further out. You swim further out into the bay with Ruben following along behind. Ruben swims... Swim further out. You swim further out into the bay, Ruben's leading slightly ahead. Ruben dives beneath the surface and shortly afterward pops up honking. You can make out the dark silhouette of what looks like a chest in the sand below. Let's investigate. You take a deep breath and dive. I want to make this
Do not move too quickly, for haste breeds only failure.
I want to make this pendulum have a sense of like being waves. I thought that was kind of interesting thing to explore. Ah, come on. I totally had that. You grab at the chest but don't manage to get a good grip on it. Let's try again. Ah, come on. I suck. I suck at my own game. There we go. I think it takes 1 gold and 1 silver to get it back to shore. You manage to haul the chest back to the shallows. Oh no, 1 gold will get you all the way. Good times. You pry the chest open and muddy water pours out, revealing some worn but probably valuable coins. I never found a chest in the ocean. That didn't happen. Ruben eats the bubbles and splashes around. That's a thing. That all happens. You return to the beach and grab a towel from your pack to dry off while Ruben splashes along the shoreline. You dress, collect your gear, and then lead Ruben back to Hearn. We can walk along the beach. Why not? You call Ruben, who comes bounding towards you, and head off along the beach. Hearn whistles to grab your attention and tosses you a ball. The sand glistens beneath your feet. Let's throw the ball. You throw a ball into the shallows. Ruben dashes into the water, and as soon as it's deep enough for him to swim, dives in and pops up next to the ball. Let's walk some further. Small crabs march along the sand, burrowing into holes as yourself and Ruben pass by. Several sandpipers run ahead of you, stopping to pick at unlucky crabs along the way. Let's throw in a ball. You throw a ball along the sand. Ruben gallops after it, leaving deep tracks and spraying sand up into the air. You walk further along the beach. The section is dotted with empty shells and cuttlefish remains. Ruben inspects each one intently. Let's throw the ball again. Hooray! Let's walk further. You consider walking further, but you're far enough away that Hearn is barely visible. You wouldn't be able to see him if he tried to signal to you. We throw a ball out into the shadows. We throw again. I can't remember how many different options there are for this. It might be that we're just 2. Yeah, all good. Let's go back. Having walked enough, you decide to head back to the north end of the beach. Ruben tails along behind you, running ahead from time to time to investigate beached jellyfish. Okay, Hearn finishes his book as you approach and asks if Ruben if he's had a good time, while he prances around and shakes off water onto both of you. You load your gear onto the cart. Ruben eagerly paces back and forth until Hearn pats the back of the cart, saying, "Up you hop." And then Ruben leaps up into it. I've used eagerly twice in 2 sentences in a row. I feel really bad. With everything packed and ready to go, Hearn flicks the reins and Ruben begins to wail as the cart rolls forward. Along the way, Ruben stops wailing and suddenly vomits bait into the back of the cart. When he's done, you and Hearn do your best to scrape it out before continuing. Hearn asks if you'd mind feeding Ruben while he cleans out the cart. Let's give him a meal. It's been a big day. You pour out a mix of dried carrot cubes and peas from a large bag in Hearn's pantry into a large bowl on the floor. Ruben sits close by, staring at you with strings of drool hanging from his mouth. You say, "Okay," and Ruben dives into the bowl, pushing his face into the food to fill his mouth and lifting his head up to swallow before plunging down again. In 3 of these motions, the bowl is emptied and Ruben sits back with a contented sigh. That was how he ate. He would just... like, yeah, crazy. Crazy fast. He eats so fast. He ate more than... I swear he ate more than his own body weight in a day. You find a cold potato pie in your haversack and eat that while Ruben takes a quick after-dinner nap. Since he's not looking, you grab a few carrot cubes to round out the meal. After you finish, Ruben rouses. Weather outside turns less and less friendly, so you decide to find ways to stay preoccupied indoors. Let's play hide and seek. You tell Ruben to sit, and then run to find somewhere to hide. Where are we going to hide? We're going to hide behind a curtain. You hide behind a curtain in the living room. Your feet poke out at the bottom. Hearn gives you enough time to hide, and then asks Ruben where you are. You hear excited warbling, followed by the sound of a galloping claw troll as Ruben charges off in search of you. And this was a thing we used to do. Ruben walks around the perimeter of the living room, sniffing as he goes. He doesn't see your feet, so you grab him through the curtain as he walks past. Ruben dances and honks delightedly. Let's keep playing. Why not? Let's hide behind a door. You wedge yourself behind an open door. You are visible from one corner of the room. Hearn gives you enough time to hide and then asks Ruben where you are, blah 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 blah. Let's let him... I know. I meant to pick a fail there, but... Ruben runs into the room and looks around. He walks over to the corner and sniffs around, but doesn't see you. As he gives up, you close the door and catch him by surprise. Ruben warbles and tries to lick your face. Let's hide in the pantry. You squeeze yourself into the pantry. The door doesn't quite close. Hearn gives you enough time to hide and then asks Ruben where you are. You hear excited warbling, blah 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 blah. Ruben puts a claw through the crack in the door. You've been found. Good times. You check that you've left your hiding spaces as you're found them. That should be you found them. You join Ruben at the window and watch rain come down. Wind buffets the house. The storm's intensity increases. A sudden flash of lightning followed by a peal of thunder terrifies Ruben, who runs and hides under a table, and then behind a curtain, and then beneath a chair he doesn't fit under. Frodo was absolutely terrified of thunder, but the whole jumping under a chair thing was a different dog, as a black Labrador named Sahu that my mum had. He used to, when he was a puppy, he would sleep under the couch that, or not couch, just like an armchair that my mum would sit on. But it was only like that high off the ground. So when he was a puppy, he could squeeze in and lie down and be comfortable. But whenever he was like really frightened, as an adult, he would, as like a big full-grown Labrador, he'd try and squeeze into this space, and he would like end up lifting the chair up off the ground and cower beneath it. Thankfully, that didn't happen often, but I think he was like, mostly it was the vacuum cleaner. He like really hated that, and yeah, the Wooey is a very terrifying monster. Hearn makes reassuring noises, which quieten Ruben's trembles, but he stays cowering with a chair on top of him until the storm subsides. You decide it's time to return to your adventures. Hearn thanks you for an enjoyable day, and he and Ruben wave you off from the porch. Time passes. Your adventures bring you close enough to Rudditch that you're able to visit Hearn and Ruben regularly. I At the time that my dad got Frodo, I was living at the opposite end of the state and didn't visit much. But later on, I moved back up this end, and yeah, we were able to, like I said, go down and catch up with them in the morning, and pretty much every weekday. A day with Ruben 3. You meet Hearn in a market at Cottonmore, who invites you to look after Ruben again. You peruse the rest of the market and accept a ride back to Hearn's house. Along the way, Hearn explains that it's shedding season for claw trolls, and that Ruben might need to be rubbed down with a pumice stone to reduce the amount of Ruben snow that makes it indoors. As the cart pulls up outside Hearn's house, he tells you that he doesn't have time to stop and that he'll be back later in the day. Before leaving, he hands you a key and a large pumice stone he collected at the market. You wave Hearn off and unlock the front door to find the floor strewn with flakes of Ruben carapace. There is no sign of Ruben. He is likely out in the yard. A broom and a hessian sack partially filled with carapace bits sits near the front door. We can clean up the mess. Why not? You pick up the broom and set to work. See if we can get that gold. Nope.
Even when things appear impossible, they can be mastered.
A strong breeze blows through the house, knocking over the sack. It's empty enough that there is no spillage. Hooray! Let's continue sweeping. Alright, we'll play it safe. You continue sweeping. You sweep up a few bits of carapace and put them in the sack. So I think you get 3 for the gold. We'll see. We'll try again. We'll see if we can get the gold. Well, they never align, do they? Ah, come on. Yeah. So if you fail to get the gold, as I do, I'm just gonna go the silver way. But yeah, I think, and then the gold's worth 3. You don't have to do this. This is completely optional. Hey. A breeze blows through the house, scattering clumps of carapace bits you'd swept up before. You can put them in the sack. But that's just that's stuff that hasn't already. Oh, what am I doing? Hasn't already been swept up. It's like the most boring bit, right? I was like, that's too late. I knew it before I pressed the button, but yeah, good times.
Poorly done. You must harness your will.
We can do it.
The quiet stillness inside you.
We can do it. But yeah, Frodo is a very large character in a lot of people's lives. Not that that's any specific reason to wanna keep these kind of memories. But it does make for a lot of interesting stories.
Breathe. You have done well.
So he would shed crazy amounts of hair. So flakes of carapace scatter everywhere in the breeze. You feel like you're standing in a warm blizzard. Yeah, sometimes it would get so thick that yeah, it's. I mean, I guess anybody who's owned a dog that sheds a lot, like a large dog that sheds a lot, knows what that's like. But just yeah, a lot of work to keep the hair out of everything. I mean, he passed away 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, and he never lived with me, but he never lived in this house. He never. I think he might have visited this house once, but I still sometimes find his fur in things. It's everywhere. The air clears a bit, and you find Ruben rubbing himself against a rock. As soon as he sees you, he comes trotting over and rubs against your legs, sending more carapace bits flying. I have a photo of me where my legs are just white. I'm wearing black jeans, but my legs are white because he's decided to rub against my legs and released 3 dogs worth of fur onto them. You rub Ruben down with a pumice stone. Alright, here we go. Several flakes come off and you put them in the sack. You assess your progress. Ruben is still more than half covered in flaking carapace. You're amazed at how much can come off one claw troll. Let's rub him down some more. Wow, I'm surprised these are such easy shuffles. I think I got a lot of feedback about these ones because these are like on the critical path. You can't skip these. Ruben is nearly free of his old carapace. So yeah, claw trolls are kind of like crab-like, so I figured that they would have carapace rather than fur, and that was a good analogue. Finally, you are left with a naked Ruben bereft of his last bits of partially shed carapace. After all that work, both yourself and Ruben have worked up an appetite. It's time for a snack. While looking for an apple, you pull a small potato out of your haversack, which Ruben seems particularly interested in. You feed it to him and eat the apple. We can now sit on the porch. Let's do that. That sounds nice. Ruben seems content to stay on the front porch and gnaw on a block of wood as the day wears on. I don't think Frodo ever ate wood, but I had a German Shepherd that would just gnaw on wood all day. We got an outdoor garden setting, like you know, chairs, table, that kind of stuff, and she ate the entire thing. Took a long time, like, you know, over months, but she would just gnaw on it until it was wood chips and nothing else, and just ate 2 chairs and a table. Good times. Time passes. Alright.
Here we see yet another wheel, each different, yet each bearing their own similarities.
We get the fruit vendor. The fruit vendor wheels a cart down Hearn Street. Ruben runs back and forth on the front fence, wobbling as she approaches. The woman pauses to toss Ruben a plum and asks you to pass on her greetings to Hearn when he returns. Let's continue resting. That's fine, dude. Go away. You notice some weeds in Hearn's front garden and decide to pull them out. Ruben insists on helping. Ruben's help involves sitting between as many of your limbs as possible, eating some of the weeds, and occasionally licking your face when he thinks he can get away with it. I didn't want to make this particularly challenging, you know. I want to make you feel like you could do more or less whatever you wanted. You recline in an old chair that sits on the porch. Ruben circles around your legs and eventually curls up to nap on your feet. And Frodo was like that. He's like, would always sit on your feet. If he had an option to sit next to you or on you, he would sit on you. Let's see if we can get the last one. Nope. I know, we'll go again. A pair of people appear at the end of the street, who Ruben honks and growls aggressively at in spite of your shushing. As they get closer, Ruben's tone changes and he excitedly bounds up to the fence to accept pats and attention. He was like that, absolutely, always like that. Would growl and make a terrible fuss, and then once those people were within patting distance, best friends. You retrieve your pack and check that nothing has fallen out. As you're making your way inside, you hear Hearn returning and linger outside to lend a hand with the cart. You step inside and Hearn is surprised. He tells you that he only expected you to rub Ruben down, not clean the house, and offers you a reward for your effort. Hooray! Some more money for us. Good times. You bid Hearn and Ruben farewell and return to your adventures. Several years' worth of adventures keep you away from Rudditch longer than you'd like. Just get some junk, why not? Good times. Oh, brilliant blade. We'll take Bazza.
Perhaps you will find this more useful now that new foes have begun to appear.
Yeah, foes, sure. You pass near Rudditch and consider dropping in to visit Hearn and Ruben. Hearn meets you at the door and explains that Ruben might be injured. Inviting you in, Hearn asks you for your impression as Ruben limps over to you. The claw troll seems happy as ever, and not in obvious discomfort, but he does have a pronounced limp. Hearn tells you that Ruben has been limping for a few days now and decides it's time to visit an animal healer. Ruben wails happily on the ride over, but his demeanour changes the moment he realises where you are. As you help him down from the cart into the animal healer's waiting room, you notice that Ruben has begun to shake. Frodo would do this, any time we ever went to the vet, he'd just quiver and shake. He's absolutely terrified. And would need to be carried sometimes. It's like, it was a bunch of work. Not that I went to the vet with him much anyway. Before long, the animal healer asks you to bring Ruben. You and Hearn try to lead him, despite his, he'd need a bit of effort to get him to go somewhere he didn't want to go. He's not a light dog. With a combination of gentle pushing, coaxing, and blocking retreat, you get Ruben into the inspection room. The animal healer leans down to inspect Ruben, who, still quivering, bravely cooperates with being prodded and moved. Eventually, the animal healer announces that they can't see anything wrong. There's no sign of the limp anymore, and he appears to be the model of a fit and healthy, but timid claw troll. Hearn sighs and thanks the animal healer for their time. He tells you that this isn't the first time. The moment you leave, Ruben returns to his happy, wriggling self and wails all the way home. Hearn decides that after a meal, it'd be good to do some outside activity to see if Ruben is limping again. Let's grab a treat first, though. And we'll go for a walk. Oh no, we've already done a walk. We should have thrown a stick or something. Frodo was like that. It was a good one. Someone had shot him with an air rifle when he was I think he'd been hit by a car and broken one leg, and he'd been shot in the other leg with an air rifle or something. So he he had a limp that would sometimes come back, and every time it looked like it was a problem, we'd go to the vet, and then nothing is wrong. You'd be worried about him to the point where you're worried about him, and then he's super happy after and limp's absolutely gone. So so many false alarms. Neither you nor Hearn notice any sign of Ruben limping. Relieved, Hearn playfully wags his finger at Ruben, saying, "Mr. Ruben, you've been a naughty troll." Laughing, you bid farewell to Hearn and Ruben and return to your adventures. Good times. So normally you would get that on one run, and then next time you played, you would get the next card. Which is why I put these time passes cards in. I wanted to tell you, that stuff's going on. A day with Ruben 5. Late one night, Hearn's cart passes you on a road. Ruben greets you with typical enthusiasm, and Hearn invites you to dinner. You accept. After a short whale-filled ride, yourself, Hearn, and Ruben enjoy a meal of fire-roasted potatoes, nuts, and marshmallows. You discuss adventuring well into the night, and Hearn offers you a room to sleep in if you need. Hearn sets up a spare room, and you fall asleep quickly. You dream of the Empire falling, of leaving the world lost and in need of guidance. This is references to narrative stuff in Hand of Fate 2. You rouse early to the sensation of being shaken awake. As you open your eyes, the shaking intensifies, and you make out the face of a claw troll with its chin on the mattress. Ruben wobbles happily. Frodo was like that. He would put his chin on the bed and then wag his tail, which would make him shake, and he would eventually wake you up like that. But the more wakeful you seemed, the faster he would wag his tail, until eventually you're pretty much shaken off the bed. You dress and find Hearn preparing porridge in the kitchen. He's already let Ruben out for his morning business, and after a bite to eat, they're ready to go for a walk. Hearn invites you to join them. You accompany them, but before you reach a corner of the street, Ruben does a poo. Hearn asks if you would like to be the designated pooper scooper for this walk. That's what my dad called it. Hearn hands you a fistful of baggies, saying, "You'll need these." After a short distance, you come to a crossroad. Continue walking. Alright. This is going to be fun. Grass is fine. Ruben stops to sniff a patch of grass. You can't see anything special about it, but Hearn says it must be a very sniffy patch of grass. Ruben poos again. You fumble and smear Ruben's business across the footpath. Good times. Let's see if we can get the mare. Nope. Two people walking the other side of the street catch Ruben's attention. Too fixated on the conversation to pay attention to where he's going, Ruben walks into a lamppost. He did that. He walked straight into a like a power pole because he was super excited, just very intently focused on some people on the other side of the road. Just bam. All right. What do we want to do? Still want to get the mayor. There he is. An officious-looking man on his own morning walk crosses the street and calls out to greet Ruben. After he gives Ruben a pat, Hearn introduces you to the mayor of Rudditch, who shakes your hand vigorously, saying that any friend of Ruben's is a friend of his. This is the kind of Frodo was kind of like a local celebrity, to the point where Dad would get invitations to events saying Frodo and Henry, like not Henry and Frodo. and he'd meet people, and eventually they go, "Oh, you're Frodo's owner!" More people knew the dog than knew him. And yeah, he would attend local events and stuff. Silly. And he gets some fame. He gets some fame for knowing Ruben. You feel famous. Focused on his walk, Ruben manages to poo without stopping. You scoop Ruben's business up in a baggie. Alright, let's keep going. Let's see if we can get that vomit. Hey. Frodo and guest. Yep. Frodo and +1. Ruben attempts to eat what might be vomit, but Hearn manages to pull him away before you have a chance to find out. Always, like I said, he'd eat anything that he thought was food on the side of the road or on the footpath or whatever. And there were often times where it was a struggle to try and keep him away.
I'm not a vain man. You must appreciate that this game, has been my focus for more years than I can count. I have a certain pride regarding its twists and turns.
Yeah, the dealer's dialogue in this is not necessarily that fitting. But again, if you're playing it as part of the normal game, it's not too bad. Ruben stops to sniff a lamppost. Ruben waddles onto a patch of grass to do his business. The posterior potato is particularly pungent. You hold your breath and scoop it into a baggie. Yoink. Oh, a horse, which looks suspiciously like a dog. Ruben finds some horse poo and insists on sniffing it. Good times. On the side of the footpath, Ruben finds an apple core and, in spite of Hearn's protests, carries it for a while before eating it. Ruben deposits something on the footpath. You scoop as best you can, but it's clearly a double bagger. After one more poo, Ruben seems less eager to walk. Hearn says it's time to head home. Ruben doesn't have as much energy as he did when he was a cub. The moment you arrive, Ruben bolts into the backyard to do yet another poo. Hearn laughs and says the claw troll must be a catalytic food converter. I swear, Frodo would do, when I would ride down to my dad's house at 6 AM, he would have already done, he would have already done, the morning poo after, being let outside for the first time. And then before he went on a walk, he would do a poo, and then he'd do 3-ish poos on the walk, and then he would, as soon as we got back, he'd run straight in the backyard and do another poo, and then before we headed out to school, he'd do another poo. So it's 8 poos before 8 AM. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. He lived life with everything turned up to 11. That dog. Hearn says he needs to head out and get his horse shod before he can use his cart again. You offer to look after Ruben for the rest of the day. You wave Hearn off with Ruben, and your mind turns to food. In spite of your breakfast porridge, the Ruben-paced walk seems to have worked up both of your appetites. Let's have a treat. We're gonna play. We could do Tug of War or Inspector Gear. Let's Inspector Gear. Realizing that it has been a while since you last did an audit, you empty your pack onto the floor. You work through your equipment, looking for anything that needs maintenance. If you get the gold here, you get a free piece of equipment. It's almost impossible to get. You inspect a piece of equipment. You hone its edge with a whetstone. Yeah, let's do some more. Let's get a fail. I mean, this one is in particular is set up so you can get failures, and then Ruben blocks your view and gives you a lick on your face when you try to look around him. Oh wow!
The pendulum is changing, and the challenges it presents change too.
Ruben sniffs and honks at a pocket you forgot you had. In it, you find a piece of equipment. I guess I already have all the equipment in the deck. I wonder what that was all about. Maybe I haven't got that set up right. I wanted to get a huge failure. Come on. When I want to get them, I can't get them. Yeah, you inspect a piece of equipment. It seems to be in good repair. Ruben becomes restless and starts gnawing on your arm. Ruben sniffs each piece of equipment as you stow everything in your pack. You join Ruben at a window and watch as the rain comes down. When buffets a house, the storm's intensity increases, and then lightning and chairs. Oh, Ruben returns with something. Don't remember. Hearn thanks you for joining Ruben and himself for their morning walk. You thank them both for their hospitality and bid them farewell. Several years worth of adventures keep you away from Ruddish longer than you'd like. So I think when you get the no, we definitely have more gear in the deck. I obviously have a bug there that I need to sort out. A day with Ruben 6. Your adventures take you through Rudditch, and you consider dropping by to visit Hearn and Ruben. Hearn answers the door with a grave look on his face. Hearn ushers you in quietly and explains that Ruben has been coughing and refuses to get up. As you enter the room, Ruben raises his head from where he lies on the floor and wriggles slowly as you approach. You crouch down to pat Ruben, his old eyes looking at you fondly before he breaks into a short coughing fit. Hearn says that he thinks another visit to the animal healer might be in order. You gently lift Ruben onto his feet, who immediately lies back down. With Hearn's help, you carry the claw troll out to the cart. So the idea is I wanted you to generally fail this first thing, so that you get a sense of it being a lot of effort. You struggle to lift Ruben, and then it becomes more achievable as you go. You adjust your grip and try again. Wow, good roll there.
Well done. You continue.
Yeah, thanks, dude. With a bit of effort, you're able to help Hearn lift Ruben into the cart. Hearn flicks the reins and drives the cart slowly, avoiding bumps and sudden stops. Save for heavy breathing and a couple of coughs, Ruben is quiet during the ride. You arrive at the animal healer and remain with Ruben and Hearn in the cart while waiting for the animal healer to be available. You offer Ruben some treats. Do we want after him pasty or some dried berries? I mean, dried berries are his favourite, so let's go with that. Ruben sniffs the berries and licks your hand, but does not eat. This is more of a reference to when my cat passed away. We went to the vet, and I had some bits of chicken, and he didn't want to eat them, and that's a pretty big signifier when his favourite food is not something he's interested in anymore. The absence of Ruben's usual enthusiasm for food brings tears to Hearn's eyes. He tells you that he is always worried that he wouldn't know when it was time, but he understands that the time is now. Instead of having Ruben come up into the inspection room, the animal healer comes out to the cart. After tending to Ruben briefly, they agree it would be best to put him down. Hearn places a hand on Ruben's head as the animal healer prepares the poisoned needle. I was thinking about letting you do that and giving you like a precision gambit for like how successful you are with applying the needle, but that didn't feel it was poor taste. The animal healer explains that this will be quick and painless. Hearn nods, and the poison is administered. Life fades from Ruben's eyes as tears stream down Hearn's face. You're not sure how much time has passed when Hearn eventually looks up at you. You ask if he'd like to go home, and he nods. You leave him in the back of the cart and take the reins. I also thought about giving you like a wheel gambit here, where you swerve left to avoid stuff, and it's like one good one in a whole bunch of bad ones. With the wheel spinning, or you swerve right and the wheel spins in a different way. But also, again, not in good taste. You drive the cart slowly. As you reach the house, Hearn wipes his eyes and asks where you think Ruben should be buried. So we know that he liked the garden, we know that he rubbed himself clean on the rock. There's a tree, a few things, a few different things. Let's go with the tree. You help Hearn dig a hole under Ruben's favourite tree. Together you bury Ruben, and you sit with Hearn until it's time to leave. With a deep sigh, you bid Hearn a sad farewell, and Ruben a final one. Your heart breaks. So you get a card called Grief, which is a curse that cannot be discarded, and it costs you 50% of your max life. Again, when you play this as part of a chain that happens partway through a run in which the narrative is completely unrelated to this, and mechanically, I felt like, that's a significant burden to bear, and something you'll definitely struggle with for the rest of the run. In this case, you don't have any combat, you don't have any other downsides. You just it doesn't really have a big deal, but it's definitely an impactful thing when you're playing the game normally. Your life goes on, your commitments and responsibilities keep you busy, but a sense of loss hangs over you. A day with Hearn. You find yourself passing through Redditch again, and we could visit Hearn. I wanted to do a variant of the card that was specifically focusing on Ruben's absence. So it's the same image, but with no claw troll. Hearn answers his door and greets you warmly. He says he's about to go for a walk and invites you to join him. You don't get very far before someone calls out to get Hearn's attention. So these are all people that you've interacted with previously. You might have missed some of these cards, but they're all kind of relevant. As you walk along South Street, the mayor of Redditch approaches Hearn to ask how Ruben is. You continue walking. As you pass through Market Street, stallholders ask Hearn where Ruben is. As you walk by the river, a couple gets up from their picnic and tell Hearn they're sorry to hear that Ruben has passed away. As you walk down North Street, you pass a fruit vendor who stops to ask Hearn how he is doing without Ruben. Each person's attention wears Hearn down visibly. You return to the house. Hearn tells you that every day, everywhere he goes, someone mentions Ruben. Let's offer an aphorism, why not? You tell Hearn that Ruben had a big impact on the lives of those around him. Hearn considers this. He says he just can't believe that Ruben is gone. Well, let's be empathetic. You tell Hearn that you miss Ruben too. Hearn takes this on board. He says that life without Ruben is hard. Let's reassure him. You tell Hearn that he'll be okay. Things will get easier in time. You sit with Hearn in silence for a while. Eventually a smile spreads slowly across his face. Hearn talks about his first memory of Ruben as a tiny claw troll cub. And so now we have an opportunity to remember some stuff. So let's remember something about Ruben's day-to-day life. We can remember going for walks. You talk about Ruben insisting on eating abandoned food on the ground. Hearn talks about Ruben hiding in cupboards when he would fit in them. Let's remember thunderstorms. You talk about the time Ruben tried to hide under a chair that was too big to fit under. Hearn talks about Ruben's teething phase. You recall the time that Ruben ate a fisherman's bait. Hearn talks about Ruben's favourite ball, which was bigger than he was when he was a cub. Frodo had this football. I might show a photo of it when we're done, but yeah, it was bigger than him when he was little. But he carried it with him for I guess for the rest of his life. There's probably still bits of that football on Dad's boat. But yeah, it fell apart. It was very well loved after like 10 years. It was a little shred of leather that was like this big and a piece of plastic that used to be from the bladder. And he would carry them around and love them a lot. Let's remember the stuffed toys. You recall the stuffed pelican that Ruben took from a neighbour. The first stuffed toy is a pelican. It describes it if you pick it up first. Hearn talks about Ruben popping his favourite ball and then continued to carry it around and play with its deflated remains for years. Oh, that was what I was just talking about. Let's remember sitting on the porch. You talk about the way that Ruben would eat weeds from the garden. Hearn talks about Ruben helping by sitting on his lap and gnawing on his hands anytime Hearn had any work to do in the garden. Wow, I'm picking the ones that that match what he's talking about. You recall how Ruben would sometimes honk with a ball in his mouth. Frodo would bark with like 3 tennis balls in his mouth. Just go, huh. Hearn talks about sharing meals with Ruben. I'm sure we can remember something. You recall the time that Ruben ran into a door while playing hide and seek. He did that once. He's just absolutely mental. Yeah, actually, we weren't playing hide and seek. But Dad would do a thing where he'd go, "Where's Gary?" which is like my stepbrother, and then Frodo would go off and find the correct person. But yeah, Dad had been like razzing him up, and he had a lot of hand signals for instructing him to do stuff, and he would go, that would mean sit, that would mean go back, that would mean down, and so he was like telling him to back up. He like told him to sit and then back up, and he's just every time he went backwards, he just get more and more excited, and then he just like was shaking with excitement, and Dad goes, "Where's Kay?" And then he just runs full tilt into this closed wooden door. There's no way that it was like, it wasn't a glass door that he didn't see or anything. He just was too excited. He's running with his head back and just smack straight into this door. Good times. I think we've got multiple memories for the beach. Yeah. Oh yeah. There was a thing where like sometimes you throw a ball for him at the beach and he would miss the ball and just keep swimming, and it would be like mad rush to get his attention before he just drifted off out into the ocean. Hearn talks about how Ruben was terrified of fireworks. Yeah, fireworks, thunder, anything. He just absolutely frightened by. You remember the way that Ruben's happy wailing would immediately stop when he realised the cart was going to the animal healer. Hearn talks about finding Ruben under his bed on the mornings after thunderstorms. You talk about the way Ruben liked to catch balls before they hit the ground. Hearn talks about the time Ruben accidentally cut him while enthusiastic trying to pick up a ball. Yeah, no, once Dad went to pick up a ball at the same time Frodo went to pick it up, and he accidentally bit him and had this massive gash in here, there's blood everywhere. Good times. You recall how Ruben would stop playing after you said last one. We didn't do it in this, but if you like throwing something for him, if you're playing fetch, and you say it's time to stop, he's like, he wants to keep going, but if you say last one, he'll just grab the ball and then run back to wherever they were meant to be instead of expecting you to throw again. Hearn talks about the time Ruben took a sandwich from a child in a pram. He like ate some kid's ice cream once. Yeah, I mean, that's dog stuff, right? You recount Ruben dropping sticks and balls at your feet, but trying to grab them as soon as he saw you trying to pick them up. Like, that's how he ended up biting biting Dad. And talks about his first memory of Ruben as a tiny claw troll cub. Alright, so we're looping again. Let's lapse into silence. You lose yourself in happy memories of a good friend for a time. Hearn wipes his eyes and breaks the silence, saying he feels better. You share dinner together, recounting and remembering Ruben's adventures. You reflect on life, death, and friendship, and consider that knowing Ruben enriched your life and made your heart bigger. You bid Hearn farewell. With tears in his eyes, he thanks you for remembering Ruben with him. And then you get a blessing, which gives you +5 max life at the end of each level. As long as you don't have more than 125. Which is cool. That's it. We winned. We winned at the Rubens. I didn't think I was going to be able to get through that without crying, but I did. He was a good friend. Absolute idiot, but a good friend. So that's Close Hand of Fate, and I will bring up some other interesting things, Ruben related things. Let me think, what's the best way to do this? Alright, we're going to do this in the browser. I'm going to show off my the Patreon post that I mentioned, where I talked about doing all the card art, and that's Miriam's sketches there. That's my original sketches. But also we've got some photos of Ruben here. Here he is eating some dude's bait. That guy had no idea. There's his football. He's on the boat. Here's us looking at jellyfish on the pier. There he is with his little football. But yeah, he's an absolute idiot. It was funny. He's super smart, super like emotionally sensitive, and very good at thinking. Thinking through problems and stuff. He just wasn't interested in doing anything naughty or cunning or any of the things that we usually associate with intelligence in pets. People go, "Oh, a very smart pet, knows how to open doors." It's like, he probably knows how to open doors, but he's much more interested in having fun, Claw Trolls are already in Hand of Fate 2. They're in the I don't have a picture here, but they're in the Fallen Treasure card. There's a bunch of them. It's like a piece of equipment in a nest or something, and you get to pick it up and hope that they don't bite you. But yeah, their little faces are great. I did the emoticon version that's in the Hand of Fate Discord channel, and people like that, and I sort of joked that one's name was Ruben, and it was always doing the wrong thing, and you'd be all like, "Ruben, no!" And that reminded me of Frodo, and so while testing out the mod tools, I started to do this stuff, and it was also doubled as a birthday present for my dad, who hadn't really I don't think he'd really dived into the thinking about this experience as a whole, or at least certainly not discussing it with me. We both had an opportunity to revisit this stuff together and talk about it, and it was I think it was it's a pretty intense thing to be to write it, like definitely had tears streaming down while writing a lot of it. But it's good to do. I think like it's good to immerse yourself in the things that were important and immerse yourself in the things that you enjoyed and that you loved. Because like memory's not super reliable, and it's really easy for like particularly um, if and Frodo's passing was pretty abrupt. He just I think he started coughing blood one day, and then he wouldn't get up and stuff, and that's pretty distressing. Like it's easy for the intensity of that to in your memory outweigh the the memory of positive things, and for that reason I think it's important to make sure that you remember all the worthwhile good stuff more than you remember the less fun aspects of the intense and stressful endings that often accompany these things. But I think like death is kind of a part of life, and it's all a part of stuff that happens, and it's healthy to be able to absorb it and move on. I don't know. I'm certainly no expert at dealing with these things. They knock me around, but I also think that if they didn't the reason that these things affect us and move us and stay with us and kind of in some cases even haunt us, emotionally haunt us, is because they matter. Like if Frodo didn't matter to me, then none of this would affect me. None of this would move me. It would not be a big thing. But the fact that he was important to me means that there's something to move through. There's a hardship to endure in his absence. So I think that in itself is something worth celebrating, which is like a super weird way to think about and look at things, right? Like it's really hard to or counterintuitive, I guess, to kind of go, oh, it feels real bad, feels real awful, but that's a good thing, and it's for good reasons. But I think that when you can approach things like that, it's a lot easier to come to terms with loss, which is a sobering note to end on. So I might jump across to some other things I did. These three games weren't the only things that I made last year. I also did a bunch of other modding related work for Hand of Fate 2, and I also did contract work on Hand of Fate 2 as well, and did a few other little bits and pieces helping out with other people's stuff. But I also made a couple other mods. This is the card art from a mod called A Dark Rite, which focuses on inviting players to view curses as positive things to be, managed, as opposed to like things that are only bad. I think that might have been the first piece of card art I did. And then when we had the Briarfolk modding competition, I also tried to paint one piece of card art a day for a few weeks, and also take some requests. And these are a bunch of ones that I made along the way, which were like cool things to do. That Ray of Hope one I really like, and I did. Hang on, I got one here. Well, actually, So I normally send my Patreon supporters a postcard based on the projects I've been working on, and here's the away team one is this, which is you can't even see that. Yeah, there we go. Yoink. Is that that concept art of the shuttle flying through clouds that I had on screen earlier. That Ray of Hope one, which is just there, and Ruben. Those three designs I sent out to my Patreon supporters, who I'm very thankful for. They help me feel like I can spend time making stuff like this to share with the world. Yeah. But yeah, so I made all these cards. I also made a little kind of like Firewatch tribute mod, which is a bit weird to squeeze into Hand of Fate. But yeah, it kind of there was someone who was streaming a lot of Hand of Fate 2, and they had this thing where every time they got a subscriber, they would like pick up a boombox that had push play on a tape, and would play that for their subscribers, and I was like, oh yeah, I like Firewatch. I'm a big Firewatch fan. And I was like, oh yeah, I could kind of squeeze in a little Firewatch thing that might tickle them. And so there's a few things, like if you've played Firewatch, you know that there's a lake, and there's a boombox at the lake, and a few other things happen at the lake, and there are little things that happen in this encounter that while they're kind of narratively Hand of Fate-ish, it just says that there's like a weird magical box that makes music. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of references to plot points from Firewatch, which I dig. So good. But yeah, so on that note, I'm gonna wrap up. If that was fun, feel free to go and check out Ruben the Claw Troll or the Away Team. Spicy Meatball's not out yet, but I'll continue working on that. Thank you all for watching. I hope this has been interesting, and look forward to doing my actual 2018 recap post, which details all of the things that I did, not just the games I made, but that'll focus on those Hand of Fate mods, and some bits of fan art, and contributions to open source software, and other things, community work that I've done, which will be a bunch of fun. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope it's been interesting, and see you next time.